intro thing. Welcome to Red Morning. Wahoo. Guys, Carl is finally I'm just joking. No, it's Thomas Seager. When was the last time we did this thing?
I don't know.
It was a while back, almost a year ago, maybe.
It was a little over a year ago, and it was in the throes of COVID. And we thought, there's no way COVID's going to last for 2 years, and yet here we are. And we talked about a lot of stuff. COVID was just sort of a common cultural theme that was in every conversation at the time. So it must have been the summer, more than a year ago.
God, I still can't believe it lasted longer than the Macarena. I really can't.
Well, I'm not arguing to bring back the Macarena. I don't think that's going to kill COVID. But if it could, I'd be willing to try.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And then thank you guys in the chat. I see the giraffes. No T-Rexes. Thank you for that one. Oh, yeah. I was talking to you briefly earlier how the guys got some memes in the chat. Do you prefer if I call you Doc or Thomas or Tom or what? I just never asked that.
Fine, right?
Thomas is fine?
The PhD helps with my academic colleagues. They need to know.
Oh, I should have added letters on mine. I've only got one set of letters. I got a CD for a Canadian decoration, and that's it. And nationally, I'm supposed to be allowed to use that. I don't know what kind of accreditation board there is for lettering, but I don't know. We'll work with that. Whatever. So the giraffes. I was telling you before, the guys, and I guess we'll start with the alpha male thing, and this is the lead into that. So we were talking about how a lot of guys that are mouthpieces for Red Pill, they talk about alpha males, this big narcissistic power fantasy. And then one of the guys in the chat, I think it's Rob, I don't know if he's here or not, made the great joke that, you know what'll fuck up a lion, an alpha male lion? A giraffe. So it absolutely sums up my thoughts on this. Like, alpha is being like those dopamine receptors that, from a hormonal perspective, it's a thing that makes a girl wet for you. And then a lot of guys have taken that to its natural conclusion of being totally, I call it artistic now, so I don't use the slur. So we just call people artistic. But I was curious because you had a lot to say on that. That's how I found you, was from your article.
So I wrote an article called "What is an Alpha Male?" and I went into some of the biology, zoology of it. I've been reading a lot of books about what we can learn from veterinarians about human health and human psychology. Ooh. And I went into the metaphor a little bit more literally. I came out the other side thinking about what Rollo has said in his first volume of The Rational Male. The alpha male has a lot of freedom. The alpha male, we think of ourselves, in our human context, as the guy who doesn't give a shit what anybody else thinks, the guy who's able to do what he wants.
Oh, yeah, the renegade.
Yeah, right. And so we all want to take pride in, well, I don't care what the consequences are in any case. And there are, of course, women who find that attractive, especially in the short term, when they're in the phase of their cycle, when they're seeking the quality gene. And I get it. It used to be easy for women, like before civilization. The guy who came home with the big ass shoulder of meat, that was the one who was victorious in combat. You wait for the homicides to sort themselves out, and now you know who's going to be the father of your kids. It's complicated for women now. And so when a man presents himself as uncaring of the consequences, there's something in her that says, well, he must have some certain things figured out, or he must have a quality. And it can work in the sexual marketplace, but it's not, it's an oversimplification of alpha, and it's not how alpha works in primate societies.
Well, I was going to add to that too. Well, NEETs, you know what NEETs are, right? Not employed. What is it? Not employment, education, or training. Basically, like homeless bums sit at home, do nothing, have nothing, going nowhere. They don't care what anybody thinks.
Yep.
But clearly, they aren't like having doors knocked down with poon offered.
I don't know.
They have waifu pillows. I'm just saying. But this is the kind of, because I was thinking of the same thing and talking about it, and a lot of these guys, like, yeah, and I think it's like one of those tangential skills, like a secondary trait. Guys that tend to be able to handle all of life's hardships, go and like in a Paleolithic context, they can hunt the meat, they can fight off the invaders. Not giving a fuck wasn't exactly the trait that makes them attractive. It's just the secondary manifestation, if that makes sense. I'm trying to sound extra smart here to keep up with you, so. But I mean, like, go on. I was curious. I kind of cut you off halfway through your thoughts here.
In a primate society, the alpha male has the privilege of mating with whom he chooses. He also has the risk of getting knocked off, of getting hit in the back of the head with a rock. Talk about approach anxiety, which men experience and women will never get. And because they can't understand why it's so difficult to approach a woman. We're a kid, we're at the bottom of the male hierarchy, and yet we're a raging bunch of hormones. So I'm talking about 19 or 20. Unless you're in a context, it could be school, in which you happen to be one of those top boys. Right. Of course it's frightening to approach a woman. And it's not just frightening because of rejection. It's not fear of rejection. It's that exists. But on a deeper level, on some brainstem level, we are programmed to fear the silverback gorilla who's going to hit us in the back of the head with a fucking rock because we approached the wrong female within the troop. And so this gets to how much of our thoughts and our feelings are really voluntary. When we're thinking about what is alpha, there is this impression, and I think it's correct, that the alpha has control. The alpha has control of lots of things in the world. The alpha can make the things happen that the alpha wants. But where control starts is in your own head, with your own thoughts, your own feelings. Leadership begins inside you with self-leadership. It is not the Corey, whatever the frick from Rollo's Volume 1.
Oh, Corey Worthington. Yeah, Alpha Buddha.
Yeah. And I get like the natural alpha in the sense that he is his own point of origin and he doesn't care what the consequences are for other people. We can look at him and say alpha. That's not the way that alpha works in the animal kingdom. The Franz de Waal, he's the famous primatologist. He says the alpha is the empathizer in chief. And the reason is that in a social setting, the alpha's status must be supported by politics and alliances. And alpha cannot go through like Corey Worthington or whatever his name, because that guy's going to jail. And jail ain't alpha. The point is that we
I've been saying that for years. Finally, somebody else says it too. You end up dead or you end up in prison.
Yeah. Until you are able to discern the consequences in social situations, able to manage yourself in the highly political and complex situations in which we are programmed to be.
Yeah.
You might be free, you might, until they arrest you, you might feel autonomous and you might feel proud of yourself and you might get laid. And it's not alpha. So I've been thinking about...
Well, maybe in the short term, definitely not the long term.
Right. And I do think that the different ages and different stages, I'm 55. And of course, I work with a lot of young people because I teach college. And what's right for a 25-year-old man is different than what's right for a 55-year-old man. We have different stages, different understanding, different challenges, different parts of our life. There's no analog. Well, I don't know. I read Preventative Medicine about the arc of a woman's development. There's an analog for men, but I haven't read it yet. What are the stages that we go through and how does it change our concerns and perceptions?
Well, we have a Rule Zero coming up talking about just that. Why do all PUA grifters end up finding Jesus at some point?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I saw that. There's a reason. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I would assume there's a reason because I get it. When you're young, you don't have or own anything and you just want to play around. It's all ego, right? Like 2-year-olds are narcissists, 100%.
You got it.
And then as you get older and fully develop in your brain, you end up just wanting to have sex with everything because you're young and virile. And then as you get older, the idea of settling down, having a family. And then beyond that, going full Maslow and trying to find some like esteem among your peers and then maybe some self-actualization, leaving a legacy. I don't think anybody's ever codified it because, and this is, I would say, the biggest fault of all the guys in all of this space, is they're so focused on trying to understand women, like breaking apart a Swiss watch. They never thought to do, like you just said, like take a look at what's with us. What are we doing that's wrong? And I want to hear your thoughts on this. I'm leading us to a question that's going to be a little bit adversarial for you. So when you talk about like how you defined alpha there, it has a vibe of victim of circumstance. And I look at it from a consequentialist lens. And I'm curious if you think I'm wrong, and if so, why? Where guys will hear that and they think, well, I didn't learn those traits early enough in my development, so they're gone forever. And I'm never going to be able to do it. And it just leads to like a sense of like helplessness where you end up just sucking on the bottle, sucking on a shotgun, I don't know, going on a Elliot Rodgers spree, or just sitting at home smoking weed and playing Xbox all day. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious if you think I'm a little off base on this one, or if you think it's got merit.
I think you're at step like half. Because the victim mentality, damn, you can almost feel your T levels dropping as you adopt the victim story.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's important to understand what happened to you. It's important to understand the way your brain has been programmed, because 80% of what you do in this world is the Daniel Kahneman thinking fast, automatic reaction.
Oh yeah, instinct.
Haidt wrote a book called The Happiness Hypothesis, and he used the metaphor of the rider and the elephant. And the Enlightenment says, I think, therefore I am. The Enlightenment makes us think, well, all of our actions are manifestations of our wants and our thoughts and rationality. It's all bullshit. Haidt says the elephant is going to go where the elephant wants to go. The rider's job is to rationalize the behavior of the elephant after the fact and explain why it makes sense, which it doesn't make sense. We are automatically programmed to do shit. We have far less free will than we're giving ourselves credit for, or demanding of our peers. And I've seen you do it. Well, why do you do that? Well, just stop doing that. And most guys, me included, have no understanding of why they do that. They don't know when their brain was young and they were children. They don't understand the way they were programmed by the experiences that they had, how it causes them to behave in ways now, and that makes them unable to reprogram themselves.
That's why I love Venkatesh Rao's book Tempo, where he talks about mental models in that sense. Like, if you know mental models, the idea is we use narratives to drive our decisions. Like you were saying, the rider on top, make the justification.
Yep.
It makes sense, because I wish I could remember the author of it. There was an article in Nature magazine, a research article, where they were making the case that logic and rationale aren't measures to discover like objective facts about the world. They were actually persuasion tools to convince other people through for our need of pattern recognition.
Yep.
Total game changer for me. I loved that. And then once I started applying it, when I say, it's like you say, like, don't do that. Well, I found a lot of the times just wrapping a narrative around that does make it easier. Like, for example, with your instinct one, I talk about sexual diabetes. Like you said, our instincts drive our behavior more than we like. We're driven to eat simple carbohydrates. And when you had to chew on sugarcane root, it was great. It allowed you to get a hunt. But now sugar is so concentrated, you get diabetes. It's that instinct, that survival instinct is now killing you. And so you wrap a narrative around it so people can understand, okay, so I can actually stop eating sugar even though I'm instinctive towards it. And I've tried to take the approach where you use that in a narrative structure to get people to, like you said, stop doing the things that they don't know why they do. And the story doesn't have to be true. Like, if I can tell a guy the moon's made of cheese and he goes to work out 3 days a week, I don't give a fuck. Now, whether that's right or not, I have no clue. I'm just, at best, I'd call me a tinkerer. You're the one with the gravitas, so. But you're really kind of blowing my mind with some of this stuff. I want
to test something out with you.
Please.
Santa Claus. Santa Claus real?
Oh, of course not.
What? How can you say? Let's test this hypothesis. The Santa Claus hypothesis predicts that presents will show up under the tree.
I've read this, so I've read this, so I know where you're going with this.
That, right? The science says science cannot refute the Santa Claus hypothesis in certain contexts. Santa Claus as a phenomenon is real. Santa Claus is like a mechanism, as in a story. I get it. It's fiction. What do you care if the moon is made of green cheese or not? If that works for you, the story is more important than whatever.
Than the underlying mechanisms.
one of the things we say at Morozco Forge is the story is more important than the experience you had. Because stories are how we make sense of the world.
Oh, it's more entertaining. Because I'll tell you right now, Heels Over Head for Rose, not nearly as fun as it was in the as to write about it. It's chapter 2 of the book, if you guys don't know. Dude, I want to say, who's the consequentialist guy? Was that Keynes? I need Carl here. He knows the fucking philosophers. Was it Keynes or Hayes or... One of the Enlightenment guys talked about like the consequences matter more than like the process, or consequentialism. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. It's too smart for me.
All the industrial revolutionary philosophers,
yeah,
they're impenetrable for me.
See, that's what I was thinking. Same thing.
Dante says it was Kant. Yeah, I don't read Kant.
All right. Yeah, he's a bit of a cunt.
That's what I thought. There's something autistic about him, but shoot, I don't want to open up that conversational thread. So where are we? We're talking about what is alpha. To be alpha isn't just you don't give a fuck about what anybody thinks, because we live in highly complex social situations. The politics of our lives require us to consider what other people think. And that can get inside our head, and it can really mess us up because we lose our own mental point of origin out of our fears for what other people think of us. We might overreact and say, well, I'm going full on art of not giving a fuck, or whatever Mark Manson's book was.
Oh, speaking of Kant. Kant. Don't get me started.
Different kind of fallacy. The alpha is the empathizer in chief. The alpha is able to understand what's going on in the people around him. And that doesn't mean that he must caretake for their emotions or their well-being. He can choose it. He can love them in that way.
Well, that's the key point. It's a choice.
Right. Where do you have choices in your life? And it is not in your automatic thinking fast system. You've been programmed by your experiences to react in certain ways, to have certain fears, you come into adulthood with the anxieties that you have been programmed to experience as a child. When we project, no, that's not the right word. When we make accusations of others without a consideration for the difficulty of overcoming their programming, we're not helping them. We're not helping ourselves. We might
Wait, you're saying my internet arguments don't solve problems?
I'm glad you came to that conclusion, Ryan. I think our stream is done.
Son of, I really thought I was helping that lady by calling her a whore. Damn it. I cut you off. I cut you off for a joke. I feel bad. Could we please let me hear the rest of it.
So you want to gain more control of your life. You got to start with yourself. You got to understand, how have I been programmed? And telling yourself the story of the experiences you've had, the automatic thoughts, feelings, and perceptions that you have, and allows you to change that story. Where I see in your book, you're like, don't care, got laid. It's a way of you summarizing the experience, boom, into a story, setting aside self-doubts and anxiety or whatever it is, and reminding yourself of the problem that you were working on in that time of your life was trying to figure out how to get laid. And it must have been a really goddamn important problem.
Well, of course, I had everything else sorted out. That was the only thing missing. And at the time, it mattered.
Well, why didn't you write a book about all the other things you saw? I'm just kidding. There'll be another book in your future.
Here's how you get a job after school. Here's how you get another one. Yeah, I don't know. That's one thing that I kind of like. You tell a guy, I guess it's my art training here, but you tell a guy to paint something, and he's going to stare at the painting for like 3 days and not know what to do. It's going to be a blank canvas. But if I tell him, paint a car in red and blue, he'll paint immediately. So you kind of need those constrictions in order to be creative. And I like using Red Pilled as the lens for that book, because then it just focused on sexual dynamics. Otherwise, I would have never put a single word on the page. So at least there, it's focused on that part of it. I mean, there's a lot of other people that are way better than me who talk about how to carve out your career or how to survive the military. Terrence Popp, for Christ's sake, great Red Pilled guy. His stuff on the military is way better than mine. So I feel like if you're going to write something that somebody else hasn't done already and done it better.
Well, I'm gonna.
But sorry, don't care got laid thing. That was the thing. So for the audience, if you guys don't know, the part of it was I used to go out because I sailed like 180 days out of the year, so I just had no time for any type of slow dating. So I'm like, I got to learn this fast, or it's just not going to happen. And my buddy Mike, who we used to go out with, he picked up all the time, and I did like maybe half as much. But I would make up all these justifications why I was still a better person than him, even though on the one, like you said, the one metric we had, he was winning. But instead of just accepting maybe he's better and I need to get better, I would say, oh, well, he's too emotional, or it's just because of his truck. And I'm like, you know what? Don't care. Got laid. Mission focus. I think that's something a lot of guys miss, is the ability to just set their sights on a goal and then either hit it or be okay with not hitting it as a means to see where you need to improve.
I put it a little differently. I wrote this article, What Problem Are You Trying to Solve? Mm-hmm. It's for startups and tech startups, and it's really good. And then I wrote another article called the empathetic post-love love letter. I was in the throes of this breakup, and I was angry and bitter, both at myself and at her. Yeah. And I started thinking about other breakups that I'd had in my life and the shame that I felt as a result of them. And I wrote about 3 or 4 of these breakups from a different perspective, from this entrepreneurial perspective of what problem are you trying to solve? What mm-hmm. problem was I working on? What problem was she working on? And where did those problems diverge? And it makes sense to break up when the two problems aren't compatible. I retold the story of those breakups, and I got to the last one, the one that I was in the middle of. And it was a powerful way of me empathizing with the woman that I was angry at mm-hmm. and seeing that I failed to appreciate the problem that she was trying to solve at the time. Because I failed to appreciate it, I wasn't the right guy for her. And you can make an argument, there's no guy for her, which is fine. But my heart was broken because I wasn't the right guy for that woman at that time. And I could tell myself a story about how I'm not attractive or I'm defective or whatever, or I'm unlovable. Or I could say, this is what she was working on. I failed to appreciate that. And that made me not the right person. The second story,
she's not yours. It's just your turn.
It's a different way of saying it.
Yeah.
People a relationship might help them solve an important problem. Mm-hmm. And that means the problems change. Once a problem is resolved, like 80% resolved, there are new problems that people are going to need to address in their lives, and new relationships might help them address it. There is a problem at my age of commitment, because at what level do you, when you're young, you might say, well, I got a lot out of that and I'm moving on to other things, because you're doing a lot of sorting out. Mm-hmm. But at my age, sometimes the problems become so complex that it's not a matter of moving on in a week or a month, or for Christ's sake, 6 months. It might be that there are that you need time to sort out whether these two people are going to adjust their developmental trajectories so that they are working on similar or compatible problems. That sounded pretty vague.
No, well, I mean, it was kind of opaque, but I get what you're saying. It's people have to, and I don't want to use the word, I don't want to say submit, but there has to be some give and take. Like, you're going to have to change. Having another person in your life, something about you has to change. Maybe one of you change more than the other. Generally speaking, Red Pill defaults to having women change more so for the guy, but the guy accommodate as like, because, she's treating you well. Why wouldn't you reward good behavior? I think the reasoning for that was it came from Ian Ironwood in 2014, where he talked about the praxeology of the dominant male. Mm-hmm. He just took the Lindy approach. He goes, you know what? Male dominant relationships have been the de facto standard for tens of thousands of years. So that's the model we're going with. That, and then I can't remember who it was, but started talking about how borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder are kind of like the male and female disorders, like extreme man and extreme woman. Narcissism, generally speaking, is like the guy thinking he's the only live person in his one act play or his one man play. And borderline being the actress working for the greatest director ever. So it kind of makes sense that like girls would kind of nudge themselves over to meet a guy. Like Rolo, huge fan of the 49ers, so his wife becomes a fan of the 49ers. Just biologically, girls are kind of hardwired to do that. But at the same time, yeah, you're going to change. If you're not going to change at all for a girl, then there's nothing in it for her. So
I heard
if I understood, did I like laymanify your statement there a bit better or no?
No, you said it better. I mean, one of the best things I've heard you say yet.
Thank God. Finally getting this thing right. It only took 4 years.
Well, I've noticed that you and Rolo are both in committed relationships. It's not an accident, because
I hope not.
there is something in it for the man. That level of commitment requires the man to look inside himself and identify those times in the relationship. You tweeted out that it's the woman's job to take care of the relationship. It's so tempting. Talk about, candy. It's now the man can absolve himself of responsibility. It feels wonderful to think in that way. It is the woman's job to caretake for the relationship. It is not exclusively the woman's job. So it can be
fair
and incomplete, right? But, I got sucked into it when I read it and thought about, well, yeah. And it's not true. It's not just male dominance or the hierarchy. You're right that there's a gajillion years of evolutionary biology behind this. And I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about me. I'm not worried about my ancient ancestors right now. I'm thinking about me. The fact is, I'm a professor. I'm a startup CEO. We're not a startup anymore. We're scaling. I am a leader.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. We crossed 2 million in revenue for 2021, like last week. And
dude, you need to get talking about that on a Gumroad course. You'll make millions.
I got to take more notes from Ed Lattimore or something on that one.
Yeah.
No, that's an aside, and I lost my train of thought.
Point is, my bad.
That I got to examine. I'm an influential kind of guy, both in university and in my company. And what I've come to understand in my relationship, I can point the finger at her and I can say, well, she does this and she does this and she does this. All true. And yet I picked her. I trained her, so to speak. I modeled for her. I have either rewarded or punished, even unconsciously or unwittingly, her behavior. Right. And some part of me wants to say, well, I'm just a guy. She's an autonomous human being. She makes her own choices. There's some truth to that. Of course, there's truth to that. To live in denial of the influence that I have in her life is not going to do either one of us any good. When I see sometimes my own words coming back to me, and sometimes it's very constructive, and sometimes it's an attack, I realize the influence that I've had, and I start thinking about, what have I modeled for her? What is she learning from me that I didn't know I was teaching, and I'd rather not teach?
Oh, look at you getting all deep. I should, to be fair, I should actually make like an essay out of it, because I think it needs a better explanation more than just like a pithy tweet. The point behind that one, again, kind of moved off of Briffault's law, which whatever, we'll get into that if you guys want, but I don't really care, is that take two scenarios. One where a guy really loves his girl and wants to make his relationship work, but she's checked out. And then you take one where a guy is kind of like, 1 foot out the door, whatever, and the girl is absolutely in love with them. Which one of those two relationships will last? If you had to pick. And I would say, without doubt, most guys pick, the one where the girl's invested. And that's kind of where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much to absolve people, but again, this is why I need to do an essay, because then you can better articulate that so people understand what you're saying. It's that if a girl it's like a competitive monopoly. You can go to whatever restaurant you want to, but once you go to that restaurant, the restaurant dictates what you can eat. And I know I'm not supposed to use, what do they say? Don't use, what the hell's the word for it? Don't use a metaphor when you have a perfectly good example. So
that was a good one.
Yeah, so I'm kind of going bad with it here, but it doesn't mean you don't have to cook the food. You don't have to do it well. The ambience doesn't have to work well, but ultimately the girl decides if there's a relationship. And granted, she has to have something in for her. So your job is to kind of be the prize worth going after, or be the guy that's worth having a relationship for. And I think that's the part that I need to add in there. But it's hard because like you start going down that route and you start doing the Mark Manson thing where it's you're not even appealing to the guy anymore. You're appealing to the women who want that guy. And you're just like, oh, makes a lot more money, but it just, I don't know. I just don't want to grow a vagina just from writing wrong.
It's too late.
Too late. Son of a bitch. But yeah, no, you're right on this one. And honestly, I'm only one person. It would be nice if there was more guys like, I mean, obviously you're not in the red pill space. You got your own thing. You got the ice company.
Red
you got
pill space left me. Like I thought I was, and then it moved.
It didn't though. It didn't, because there's two things happening, and this happened around 2014. The red pill space was the one you and I remember. It's guys actually swapping notes about stuff. Just right. Tinkerers. Hey, I tried this, it worked. I tried this, it didn't work. It was back when Roosh was still sane. And Royce was writing articles about how he went out in DC and hated the girl. And then right around 2014, I don't know who started it, but somebody, maybe it was Coach Red Pill, maybe it was that 33 Secrets guy, I don't know. But they started realizing, like, you can kind of monetize this. And that's the problem, is that all these guys who are really good at marketing would steal whatever bits of Red Pill made sense from a marketing perspective, and then went out and popularized that. So you got everybody out there talking about alpha like a wolf and shit like that. Problem was, and this is kind of when I decided to do this, was, well, if marketers are going to steal this anyway, why not take those marketing tools and apply it to the shit that you and I remember? How to make a relationship better, how to go get laid, how to go from zero to hero, all this shit. The swapping notes part. A lot of disagreements among a lot of people, and then a few people got a little bit of success, and then they kind of went off the deep end. Like Roosh was a great example, but I mean Goldman now doing peyote in the woods, then found God. Another guy, Daniel, who calls himself Gay Lube Oil, he went full Evola, which if you don't know, that's like a neo-fascist thing. A lot of guys just end up going crazy. But you're right, like the space didn't leave you. The megaphone just got handed over to the next guy. But that's the problem. Like, marketing will always beat out research. Can't be helped. Because they have the bigger megaphone, you know?
That's okay. We can let them have it. Like, beat out research on what scale? Number of followers, revenues, shit like that. We don't need it all. We only need just enough.
Well, yeah. Who's it? Really good on the 1,000 loyal customers. Isn't that the principle for entrepreneurs?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm perfectly fine with that. I mean, mortgage is paid, right?
You said something about the woman invested in the relationship. And I've been learning from you about that because I connected it to, I don't know, it might have been a tweet thread. So I'm going to ask you to paraphrase what I'm remembering incorrectly. There's a point at which the woman goes crazy on your ass. I've certainly experienced this. She's unloading all of these psychotic, and by psychotic, I mean they're broken from reality. The emotions that she experiences are real, but the accusations are not, they're not a description of reality. And when she goes full on psychotic, dysregulated break, it always used to hurt my feelings. Like, I thought, well, that's it. I'm not going to stick around for this. And I'm having an emotional flashback right now. Oh
Jesus! Don't trigger, please.
All right. My own break. And what you pointed out was that most guys have never had the experience with a woman where she is so deeply invested in him that she would have the depth of that emotion. So again, I'm paraphrasing it the way that it hit for me. When a woman has gone that full break on me, and she's hitting me with all of these emotions and accusations, what I didn't recognize in that moment is she is invested. If she didn't give a shit, she would next me and move on. But there's something about her that is so angry because she has pinned her hopes and dreams on me. And I, kind of lost track of that at different times in my life when I was when I was being hit with all that emotion.
Yeah. Oh, so it's like, yeah, the opposite of love isn't hate, it's apathy.
Bingo.
Yeah, which is a good thing. At the same time, I've been a bunch of different people putting it a bunch of different ways, so I can't take credit for any of this. I'm just doing the archiving thing. But yeah, for a lot of the times, when a girl's freaking out, I've had it in my life, I'm sure you had it in yours, you can oftentimes narrow it down to she's hungry, she's tired, or she's stressed. Or unfucked. Actually, unfucked. I should add that on there. I've seen a lot of times where, like, I've had in other relationships where it's like, we didn't have sex the night before because I was tired because of drinking at the bar or whatever. Next morning, I just knew there was going to be an argument because I didn't satisfy that need. But it's good. I like it because it gives you that level of detachment where you realize, okay, so this isn't about me actually being whatever the hell they're accusing me of. It's just she's tired. So you listen, you fog it. Oh, yeah, I could see why you're pissed off, but then you just address what the root cause is. In that case, if she's tired, here, go have a nap. I'll handle the dishes.
And it's a bitch because she's not going to tell you the root cause.
She doesn't know.
It becomes your job to figure that stuff out. Wouldn't it be so much easier if she would just tell you? And in a way, it would, and in a way that would make her more male and less attractive.
Oh yeah, the gamer girl thing, where guys just want another guy with a vagina or a guy with tits. We have those now. Nobody seems to be taking it. So you kind of wonder, it's like, dude, pick a, like, what do you want?
Right. Pick a side.
If you want guys with tits that you can go play Xbox with, they're out there. Go find them. They're on Twitter all the time, getting people banned. Well, I don't like that one. What the fuck do you want then?
Right.
I want everything and nothing. It's like, talk about men being raised as defective women. Right there. I want everything, but not that, or that. It's like,
well, now you're taking me back to, it ain't alpha if you don't understand your automatic thoughts. That is, cannot choose until you understand the way the choices are being made for you by the previous programming in your life. It reminds me of what I got out of Red Pill. Mm-hmm. For me, I had to re-examine things that happened to me as a kid. And reading Rollo, reading preventative medicine, and understanding my parents' dynamic led me to the conclusion that I've been programmed by my mother and my father to believe this bullshit blue pill feminist story about myself.
Oh, the Disney fantasy.
The what?
They call it the Disney fantasy.
What's that?
That's exactly what you're describing. It's from Red Pill. That's just the term they use.
Well, I'm not familiar with that one, but your audience will be. Point being that I grew up ashamed of myself for being a boy. I mean, I thought that everything about me was defective, that I was a defective girl. I got an older sister, I got a younger sister, I got a mother who was a 1970s flak jacket feminist, and I got a gay father. How the hell was I supposed to grow up? I didn't know that until like 6 or 7 years ago when my sister called me up and said, I'm really worried about dad's porn. I'm like, what are you worried about that for? You found the one guy in the world who like gets on the internet and uses porn? And she goes, no, that's not it. It's gay porn. Wait a minute. What?
There's a revelation.
Fuck. And now I'm talk about stories. I'm rewriting the entire history of my parents' marriage, my relationship with my father as a child. I had no idea how these things impacted me and how they led to, talk about frame, how they framed the world that I thought I was living in, and the fact that world was a lie.
That's crazy.
I got to reconstruct all of that. And if I can't, I will remain a victim of these automatic thoughts, the frame that I was programmed with as a child. It's impossible for me to maintain my own mental point of origin when the point of origin that I sort of inherited from childhood is a freaking lie, meant to serve my parents' agenda rather than my own. So for me, I got to start there. I got to say, why do I think in certain ways? Why do I react in certain ways? My father was a professor. Why am I a professor? And is that something, that where I want to stay? All of these things about decoding your automatic programming create a space in which you get to choose. Now that you understand what the program is telling you, you become less psychotic. You say, the reaction I'm feeling now is not real. It is a consequence of my programming. I'm going to change my programming. The flip side of that is she's programmed too. Women are programmed too. We spend,
absolutely.
I mean, whether it's Neil Strauss's Game or Neil Strauss's Truth, Game is about how are women programmed so we can hit the right buttons, behave in the right ways, and get laid. Mm-hmm. That's fine. Truth is how have I been programmed by my mother to have thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and how do I change those? So when I see what her automatic negative thoughts or what her automatic thoughts, feelings, and perceptions are, it helps me to distinguish between the ones that she's pre-programmed for and the ones that can inform me, improve my understanding of reality. And it's a fucking bitch, because I would be so much more comfortable blaming her for all my problems. And then where would I wind up? With some other woman who isn't anywhere near as insightful or able to contribute to my learning and my developmental growth, which is really what I'm working on.
Yeah, well, kicking the can down the road is what I called that one. We actually had a guy that did the exact opposite of what you did. He went by the pen name like I am Steve McQueen. Of course, Steve McQueen, right? Okay. Same thing. Kind of came to that conclusion while he was in a marriage, dumped all of it on his wife. It's like, this is all her fault. I'm out of here. No self-awareness, no understanding how he got to the point he did, no idea of what choices he made that was wrong. He didn't use what we call use your wife as a sparring partner, even if you're going to leave. Like, if you can attract her, then you can attract anybody. Sure enough, 6 weeks later, he got into a new relationship with a girl, better than his wife in every way. And then 3-4 months later, he's like, she's acting just like my ex did. And it's like what? You said, it was hilarious. We eventually had to boot him because he started blaming all of us for not helping him on this. And we're just like, you can't save people from themselves. But you're right. That self-awareness thing, it's just huge. Same thing. Different story, though. Like both of my dad and my stepdad, alpha by that like tough guy attitude. That's why every time I see alpha males on Twitter, I just think back to that and I'm like, fuck that. Like, my dad was a gambler, drinker, died a year before, like, you're 55, you said?
Yeah.
Died at 54 of emphysema.
Fuck.
Definitely did not look as young as you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, my stepdad, well, that's the thing. So he'd be alpha by all those things. Didn't give a fuck what anybody thought, did his own thing. Drove the Corvette, which in the 70s, I guess, was cool. You know, my mom had to leave him because when we were like 5 years old, because, I mean, degenerate gambler, normal family household doesn't really work out with a stepdad. He was like roughneck kind of thing. The rich guy in town owned the logging company. He fucked half the neighborhood, used to do coke and crack and shit like that. And same thing with him. He almost got arrested for his alpha behaviors. And so I remembered that. And it's kind of come to influence me in the meantime because I did the Promise Keeper thing where, well, my mom complained about him all the time. Right. So I'm not going to do any of that stuff because then women will like me. And that's the problem is that, well, he attracted like half the town. Yep. So clearly something in there was good. All you have to do is not have like RCMP officers try to plant coke on you at a roadside check stop. Yeah. That's another story. But yeah, and then you kind of come to the conclusion, okay, so just take the parts that worked well and skip the parts that don't. And it worked for me because for him, when my mom left him, he broke right down and nobody was on his side. Everybody was on her side. And the only solution he had was to rage. So I kind of saw the importance of it too. Like, because when you're down, everybody will kick you as a man just because we're predetermined to like women. So that's fine. Just be aware that that exists. Nobody's coming to help you. And the traits that you instinctively use when the chips are down tend to be the ones that make it very easy to kick you when you're down. Like being the angry guy, lashing out, drinking, all that shit. It tends to be very self-destructive. And so you got to realize, okay, so there's got to be a better way to go about it. But yeah, like you said, doesn't matter if your dad was a beard or your stepdad was a cokehead or whatever. You all kind of get to the same point at the end, which I really enjoy. It doesn't matter where you start. Everybody can end in the same spot. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I learned that term beard. Rule Zero Dad taught that to me. It's when the girl marries a gay guy for appearances. I don't know if that's what that was, but they're called beards.
Well, I think I did learn that one, and I'm still angry at my dad, but I can empathize with him. You got to imagine a man, he's in graduate school in the 50s. He was in the Air Force. He, he's ROTC. He was a meteorologist. We can't really romanticize this.
Yeah. Well, Air Force. You already said gay. I get it.
Okay, Navy man. But after this revelation, I was able to approach him about it, and he said, "Tom, have I ever told you about the love of my life?" Well, no, Dad, you haven't, and it's not your mom. Really? And
jeez.
Yeah. And so he talked to me about the man that he was still carrying a torch for, and God, I forget how old he was, almost 90, and how much he missed that man. And that's okay. Like, him unburdening himself that way, to me, was doing me a solid, because I understand him better. I understand my own origins better. And I appreciated the vulnerability in the conversation. That allowed him to tell me about his childhood, about being bullied, about his domineering mother, about his distant dad, like all these kinds of things. I can empathize with him. He gets to late 50s, early 60s, and he's working in math education. And he wants to have a family, but he's not attracted to women. What the hell is that guy going to do? He finds my mother, who, for whatever reason, she wanted to be loved, and she told herself a story about how this was okay. And then they raised 3 kids, one of which, happens to be me. I can empathize, not because I'm old enough now to understand, and I can sympathize too, which is different than taking his perspective. He was in a tight spot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still kind of pissed.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't have any resent or anger anymore myself. I don't know what the difference would be on that, but I guess for me, it's just kind of like, what's it going to change? Just kind of like, the world does what it does. I guess that's the approach I take. Although, to be fair, the way I was raised, it was more, what the hell do they call it? What are the avoidant attachment? I think that might be the one. Where it's just kind of like you're more detached from things. Carl said it once, but I can't remember what the hell it was. Essentially, like for everybody else, when you get events that give you an emotional response, ours are like -5 out of a 10 scale. So I guess that kind of worked in my favor. I was like,
yeah,
did what you got to do. I get it. Whatever. Just take what works, don't what doesn't. But I've always tried to like impart on other guys too. It's like, look forward. Like, you can navel gaze about the past as much as you want, and at a certain point, it becomes more of like a dopamine thing as opposed to like an understanding thing. I noticed a lot of guys did that. They dwelled on their ex-wife for forever, and she was the greatest, and she was the greatest. And you can tell, like, they're not trying to sort anything out. They're just trying to relive that same negative emotional feeling because it's a strong emotion, and they're almost hooked on it the way like a heroin addict would be, even though they know heroin is bad for them. Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and it is.
Oh, no, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not saying you. I'm speaking general here.
Oh, no, totally me. But I'm going to tell you a different story for why I wrote an article, put it up on Medium, why I have obsessive thoughts. Mm-hmm. And where I'm disagreeing is you're like, it's kind of like a heroin addict. And I've heard that analogy. The analogy is imperfect to a degree that I'm going to say it's wrong.
Okay.
I get where people are going. There's a compulsive behavior. We have difficulty managing our negative emotions, and so we seek relief. We become physically addicted to the relief that we seek. But this is an imperfect analogy in the case of someone who is dwelling on their old relationship or talking about how perfect something was. We are hardwired by our biology with what's called a compulsion to repeat. There's a great anecdote in Peter Levine's book. I think it's called Trauma and Memory. He talks about these cheetah cubs. The cheetah cubs are attacked by a lioness, and they scurry up the tree and they escape the lioness. And then eventually the lioness gets bored and she goes away. And this is all on some BBC documentary that he's watching. What do the cheetah cubs do for the rest of the day? They play lioness attack. There's an article up on my Substack about this, or maybe it was on my Instagram. I don't remember. But the point is that we obsess over the past because we are hardwired to relive the traumatic experience from a position of control until we resolve it. And we see this in relationships all the time. I'm like a little fucking traumatized cheetah cub, and I got to play with my other cheetah cub siblings. Okay, you be the lioness, and now I'm going to work out this escape, or, whatever the hell it is. Go to my Substack, Ryan. I'm pulling Medium down because they've censored me. They deleted AJK's entire account. I'm pissed at Medium, and my stuff is up there so that people can read it. But I'm moving it. It's SeagerTP.substack.com now, and that's where you can read some of this stuff.
T.substack. I'm gonna add a link to it.
Add away. Point being,
there he is.
It's not a heroin addiction. It is not a drug addiction. It is your compulsion to relive your trauma from a position of control. It's why your buddy, whoever the hell he was.
Mike?
No, not Mike. Sorry. The other guy had to kick off the forums. It's the guy who recreated the exact same relationship after he blamed everything on his ex-wife. He's going to keep doing it. And he's not doing it because he's stupid. He's not doing it because he's morally defective. He's doing it because he's been programmed by evolutionary biology to figure the frickin' problem out. He knows he's going to be miserable until he figures it out. And so he'll create this theater of his own life and ask other people to unwittingly play the roles of those who traumatized him. Whether that's...
How's it working out for him so far?
Shit. Because it's unconscious, because these people did not sign up for that. And you can do it consciously. This is in Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. He's got a chapter on using improv theater. And a mentor of mine was fortunate enough to meet a woman who loved him in this way and wanted to do it. He related to me. She said, "Tell me who hurt you. Tell me what she did to you. I will be her. Do the things to me that you wish you could have done to her." What a gift this woman is trying to give the man that she loves. She will temporarily step into a character. I think a lot of people in the BDSM scenes are trying these things unconsciously. And she's willing to play a role, knowing that that is not her, knowing that it is in this temporary setting that allows him to relive his trauma from a position of control. That resolves the trauma, and he no longer feels the compulsion, and everybody wins. I recommend that if you're going to do this, you find a therapist who understands the power of improvisational theater and can sort of orient the roles that people are going to play, because you're turning people into props in your own drama. And when you do it consciously, I'm not saying it's wrong. We are doing it unconsciously because we have been programmed. 80% of our fucking behavior is, a result of things that we've experienced in the past. And we invite people in the dramas of our own minds without even telling them what their character sketch is. No wonder they get hurt. And I feel like, kind of a shit for having done it myself. And I'm becoming self-aware enough to almost catch up to my own behavior. Takes me a few days, maybe a week.
Oh, whatever. If it was easy, everybody'd be doing it, right? Okay, so here's my thoughts on this. I was taking some notes as you're doing it. Body keeps the score. The shrink thing. You know what? I'll do with the shrink thing first, because I have a very love-hate relationship with therapy. Military offered it me during my little dark time. Spoken to a lot of therapists. I'm actually kind of annoyed at the profession. I find it's failed in its institutional duty.
Yep.
And perverse incentives, whatever. First thing on that one, that reminds me of when you always get therapists like online, like Dr. Sean Smith, great guy. I don't mind. I like him at all. I'm not shitting on him. We'll just find a masculine therapist. That's the goal. Or like you said, one who's good with improvisational stuff, to which my thought is therapy has an accreditation board, same as lawyers have the bar, right? As best I can tell. So if they have that accreditation that says I am now a licensed therapist or I'm a licensed psychologist, there should be a certain standard that you're able to hold them to. So if I need to find a masculine therapist, or if I need to find a therapist who specializes in this, or what's the big one they use now? Healthy Gamer is this very popular Twitch guy who's a therapist, and he talks about evidence-based Eastern philosophical like mumbo jumbo shit. And I'm like, well, if there's all these adjectives you have to add to the end of it, then what good is being a fucking therapist? You know what I mean? Like if I see a doctor, I know there's going to be certain skills that this doctor has. And to be a doctor, you have to have them. As a lawyer, I can trust that you're going to have the basic care of law, my best interest, fighting for me, even if I am guilty in that. Like, he won't lie for me. Like, you know what I mean? There's certain standards to it. And I find therapy doesn't have any of that. So I'm actually kind of annoyed with the profession.
It's an understatement.
Yeah. So how different is that than me just finding a priest who's willing to listen to my thoughts, or having a drinking buddy at the bar who I can cry into my beer with, or a bunch of dudes online, red pill. Functionally, to me, it makes no difference other than like which one's going to be more useful. The second part, it was funny. Here's my concern on this. It's where, like you said, I know how the body works, like the neuroplasticity, evolutionary, you drive towards certain things, you can play act it. It kind of reminds me of the same concepts of learned helplessness. Do you know the term? Do you know that one?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I did that to my wife.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, if you guys don't know, learned helplessness, it's a B.F. Skinner behaviorist thing. I always joke, they put dogs in cages, half of them, doors were open, they electrocuted the cages, dogs jumped out, the ones that couldn't jump out fought for a while and eventually just kind of sat there and took shocks, which isn't the crazy part. The crazy part is then they opened the cages afterwards, and those dogs that were in there never actually tried to escape. It's like you said, they held on to their past trauma.
Yep.
And that's kind of where I lump all of that part in. I think of it as learned helplessness. Yes, I get it. It's our need to reenact our past, but it's not helpful. And the only roadmap I've ever seen out of it is Rollo's concept of being zeroed out, which I take to mean a narcissistic injury. Like you said, happy wife, happy life. Guys get divorced, the community turns against them. That's psychologically to them. Like, it's not a fight or flight response warranted because it's just a divorce. But in your mind, psychologically, it's treated as a life or death scenario, or finding out your parents aren't what you thought they were.
Yep.
And the beauty of those situations is because, like you said, our brain is very, very hardwired to just get into a rut and do it because it's very easy calorie-wise to like sustain all those instinctive thoughts. But during those fight or flight moments, your neuroplasticity changes. Your body literally realizes, or your brain realizes, like, if I don't start adapting to this new set of circumstances, I'm probably going to die. So the approach I've liked, which I think differs from yours, but I'm curious on your thoughts too, where that zero out happens, you become very, very angry, your brain becomes highly, is it plastic or not plastic? Which is the one that means better able to create neural connections?
Plastic.
Thank you. Becomes more plastic. Then you have to apply whatever mental models that you need to use to get yourself to a better place, whether they're true or not. We're all going to have our stories. We're all going to have our half-truths, our economic models that aren't true but useful. Before that window closes of neuroplasticity, where you make the changes you need to make. So instead of having like, my dad did this and my mom did that and feminism taught me that and all that shit, it's like, okay, so here's some new ones. Good enough. And then once everything kind of solidifies in, your anger phase is gone. Now you're on like a newer, more useful way of living. And that's kind of the way Red Pill has always approached it, whether you get to Dread Game or the safety net, how guys handle divorce and that. So I'm curious your thoughts on that, because it sounds fairly different than what you just described as well.
I think you're operating on a level that most people cannot access right away. I've thought about it. No, it's not a surprise. I've thought about it a little differently. You're in the throes of heartbreak. You're feeling like you're feeling the existential crisis of, it's not just rejection, but everything in your world that you thought you could count on and rely on. That's the zeroed out. Yeah. And I hit a point where I cycled through, there's something wrong with her. Well, that's comforting. And look, here's the 9 fucking things that are wrong with her. Well, then that's called the outer critic. The inner critic takes over. No, there's something wrong with me. And when you hear a guy who's coming out of a relationship, maybe his wife dumped, oh, she was so perfect. Oh, his inner critic is like on overdrive. Right. And it's true. Like there could be a shit ton of things wrong with me. So there's something wrong with her. There's something wrong with me. And then I found this third one. There is something wrong with my understanding of the world. Like,
Ooh.
I don't know how the goddamn world works. I could say there's nothing wrong with her. There's nothing wrong with me. And it wouldn't be true, but it's a good, as a mental exercise. What is wrong with my understanding of the world? What are the lies that I'd hoped were true that have just been stripped away? And am I willing to get to a better understanding of reality in the world that will then allow me? And look, it's not a moral defect in me. There can be things that are wrong with me. It's not a moral defect in her. And too often we comfort ourselves by saying, whatever the hell, she's a bad person.
She's just a bitch.
Right. Oh, now, like, in any case, she's not morally defective. I'm not morally defective, but my understanding of the way the world works is wrong. The lies that either I told or I believed or that I was complicit in that made me feel comfortable and good about myself, that avoided these negative emotions that I hate dealing with, those lies are getting removed.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm willing to change my understanding of the world.
Well, that's just it. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? That's another pithy one I throw out there.
Right.
A lot of people just want to be right. So she's a bitch or she's a lesbian or she cheated on you because she's a whore or hypergamy made her do it. But then, yeah, I'd rather be happy. How does this not happen to me in the future? Or if it does happen in the future, how do I better fortify myself against the negative consequences?
Happiness is overrated.
Well, the guy I was quoting here before who loves how you're talking about inner game, that's Wine More Please. If you don't know, he's another PhD. Brilliant guy. He's probably my favorite guy within the entire Red Pill. So it's high compliments from him. He never compliments anybody.
Okay, wait a minute, who is this?
Wine More Please? He is...
What? Oh, shoot. I've seen him on Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah. He's been around longer than me. Like, he fucking knows his stuff. So, like I said, when he gives a compliment, I always, like, fucking tip of the hat to it.
Terrific. Thank you.
Fuck, I forgot where we were going with this one.
Understand. Well, I mean, I'm going backwards. Understand your own programming, because when you fail to understand your own programming, you're not free.
Nope.
And then understand other people's programming, because you operate in a highly social world. And although it's easy to next, and I hear kick her to the curb, I hear that all the time in Red Pill. You're losing an opportunity to come to a better understanding of yourself. I'm not saying you got to stay with her. Like, maybe kicking her to the curb, maybe ending the relationship is the right thing to do. But you're losing an opportunity to say, what problem was that woman working on? To improve your understanding of yourself and improve your understanding of other people around you allows you to navigate this complex social world that we are hardwired to live in better, to get more of the things that you want without all of your feelings getting in the way of what you want.
Yeah, to be more attractive and to be less unattractive. Well, yeah, and then, to be fair, the kicker to the curb thing, like, I get it. If you're on first date with a girl and she's pulling bullshit, then obviously putting up with that is not a good thing. But you're right. It's what the sparring partner analogy is for. If you're married for like 5 years, you have real estate, you have kids, there's legal consequences to that. Kicker to the curb doesn't have to be immediately. It can be on your own timeline, which I agree with you. There's some things you probably need to work on. That's why I like the one. She can't stand you. She's seen all of your bullshit, your wife. Well, if you got to learn how to be more attractive and learn games so that you can replace her after you've ditched her, start gaming her. Because if you can win over the girl that's seen you at your absolute worst and is so comfortable with you that nothing you do can surprise her, and if you can make that attracted to you, you can make anything attracted to you. And there's always that side benefit too, that let's say the problem is you, like you said. Maybe it's me, maybe it's her. So you do all these things to deal with anything that you possibly have in your life that made you the problem. Correct. And then if all of a sudden the wife changes behavior, she starts responding better to it, then you're like, oh, there was a problem and I fixed it. But if the problem was her and she was a bitch, like we also said, and then you fix all your stuff, that's great too, because now you're like, you reach that moment where you're sitting there, it's like, dude, I've got everything on point. And she's still a bitch. No, I think it actually is her fault. I'm fucking out of here. But it's like, there's never that nagging thing in the back of your head. It's like, oh, could I have done better? Was there, like, you're like, no, I checked. No, I think it's pretty good.
Well, that's my issue then. Because it doesn't matter, 90%, 10%, it doesn't matter what the breakdown is. I'm always going to be examining myself and saying, where could I have, or what could I have done better? Even outside, even if the relationship
Yeah.
ends, I know that I picked her. I trained. I know that I'm so influential in my relationships
Mhm.
that for me to say, well, I just picked the wrong person. Bullshit. I'm 4 years into this relationship. I did not pick the wrong person. I picked her for reasons that I might not fully understand. And if I
Yeah.
don't freaking understand them, I'm going to go out and pick one that I'll try and shape into the same person. It has, and this relationship that I'm thinking of, it has not been without its trauma. I mean, she has trained me as well, and I got to think about the things that I have. How are the ways that I've changed in ways that maybe I didn't want to change, so that I can reshape myself.
And
Where is
ultimately, are you happy with them?
right?
That's the big question. I guess that's more of an existential question. You don't have to answer. That's a bit
Right. Is
more
that who
personal
I
than,
want to be?
yeah.
So I've been thinking a lot about
Well,
that.
not even want to be. I should say not want to be, but are happy you're there. Like, I didn't want to move to Toronto, but through circumstances it happened. I'm much happier here than I was in Montreal. But my
It's an
goal was never to
experiment.
move here.
You
What's
didn't
that?
know. It's an
Yeah.
experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna find out. This. I wrote a comment. The 4 reasons that men go to strip clubs, because the
Is one of them the
world.
wings?
No, that was one.
I
I
think I've
went.
been lied to a lot. They have the best wings in town, I've heard.
No, it was one of these women authors that works as a bartender at a strip club. And she wrote an article. It's so easy to ridicule and shame men who are in strip clubs as if they're doing something morally defective.
Mm-hmm.
And she posted her article, and I'm like, well, hang on a second. And I said, these are the 4 reasons, that legit reasons for men to go to strip clubs. First reason, they have no idea what they like. I mean, they just might not have enough experience with women to say, oh, I like this. Oh, I like that. I like this body type. I like this kind of hair. I like this kind of face. A strip club is a gallery of women in which men can gauge. So, like, you
Mm-hmm.
go to a car dealer and you see, well, which color car. Sometimes you don't know what you want until you see what the choices are. So, the first reason is they don't know what they like. Second reason they're going to go to a strip club is they don't know what they're feeling inside. The strippers are expert at attempting to elicit what turns the man on. And he's probably not even aware of what turns him on. So it could be this stripper, or it could be this move, or it could be some. And he gets a chance to discover in himself not just what he likes in her appearance, but what does he like in her behavior, and how does his own body react to different things. Third reason is men need practice talking to women. They need men practice talking to women in sexual settings because they're programmed for approach anxiety, and they need to frickin' get over it. And
Yeah.
the way to get over it is to do this sort of stress exposure therapy by practice talking to women. And the fourth reason is that when they take their wives or girlfriends, they will activate pre-selection. They will activate the woman's competitive desire.
Ooh, this is the most controversial one of the 4.
Why is that controversial?
I don't know. It's what you put in your essay.
Oh, you're reading it now?
I've actually read a lot of your stuff. I don't know if you know this.
Well, I'm writing to a woman, and Medium is a female-dominated platform. And I do believe it's controversial because it sounds so manipulative. Oh, I'm going to take my girlfriend to a strip club because that's going to get her hot for me. Just because people accuse it of being manipulative, or maybe manipulative isn't a bad thing. The point is, this is reality. This is the way people are programming. And I think I wrote in the article that I've tested this hypothesis. And what did I discover? I discovered that the woman I was with was the body type I liked. I discovered that the woman I was with, who was touching my back and touching my leg, and that she already knew how to turn me on. I discovered that approach anxiety is no longer a big ass deal for me. Like, and it's not with the woman that I was with, but that I'm okay talking to sexual women in sexual settings without becoming all dysregulated by anxiety or overcome with my own sexuality.
Yeah,
And then
confident in your masculinity, some people would call it. But yeah,
they
definitely.
might say that.
You're self-assured.
I thought of it that way. I'm just saying I don't feel anxious anymore.
Yeah.
Then we got home and I got the best goddamn strip dance tease sex that I didn't know it existed, but she did, and she found it in herself. So these 4 reasons, they've worked out great for me. And in a way, I think they worked out well for her because I came out of the experience admiring her more, bonded to her more, appreciating her more, valuing her more, being more attracted to her as a result of going through it.
Well, yeah, I know part of it too is like if a girl is happy, oftentimes making you happy makes her happy. But for a lot of girls, they don't know how to make you happy because for whatever reason, like my girl, great example, hated buying gifts for me. She didn't know what I liked. And I'm always like, just whatever, because I didn't really like anything. She got a real good bonus when Modern Warfare 2 came out, because I liked the first one. And it just happened to come out the month of my birthday. So she was like, for those 3 years where you kept buying Modern Warfare games, it was the best time of my life, because I just had to go pick the newest one up for you. And then they had that stupid one, like Modern Warfare 4, where it was like Cyborg. And I was like, I'm fucking done. And she goes, no, you're not. I don't know what to get you for your birthday. But, I mean, and that's a goofy example, but yeah, a lot of times it's just, and there's a great essay from the Red Pill. I can't remember who wrote it, but it was like a litmus test for men who, like you said, are self-assured, have that mental point of origin, confident about their masculinity. It's like, can you just sit there and enjoy a blowjob? Or are you that guy that as she's doing it, you have to like, oh, is she okay? Should I stroke her hair? Do I have to check and make sure she's not hurt? Like, you know what I mean? Instead of just sitting back and letting her make you happy.
Yep. It's
surprisingly, yeah, that's surprisingly common. And it's funny because I'll put it out there because I'm like, I'm past, so I don't give a shit. And online, people are like, that really happens? That really happens? But then look, private messages, it's like, oh, dude, thanks. I couldn't say anything, but there's always 10 of those for every one guy. It's like, whatever. And so I always laugh that there's always this undercurrent. There's always like a shall not be talked about insecurity that affects so many people. But the view numbers never lie, even if the outward alpha male bravado does,
I was raised by my feminist mother who married a gay man to think that all sex is rape. It's just a question of who is raping who. What a terrible thing.
That's a mind fuck.
Yeah, because when I was a young man, I was inexperienced with women, but I couldn't approach them. Talk about approach anxiety. I had to wait for the woman to come on to me hard because of this construction that I came out of with my childhood. Talk about extreme consent. These poor ladies that I dated as a young man, if they weren't going to rape me, then we weren't going to have sex. And so my only relationships were with women who were very aggressive. And
predatory.
Say what?
Predatory even. Is that a fair, or am I being a little too harsh?
No, it sounds harsh, so I got to think about it. And in some cases, no, but man, in a couple of cases, yeah.
There was this one time.
I got to reflect on some shit now, Ryan. Point being, I had this construction, and I was not able to enjoy sex just for myself. And I shouldn't say just for myself. I was not able to recognize that me enjoying myself was also pleasing her. That because she loved me, because not more than just attracted to me, she got something out of pleasing me. And it created all kinds of barriers in my relationships, especially sexual barriers. All the shame that I freaking had made me a less satisfying sex partner to her because I wouldn't allow her to please me. I'm a selfish.
Well, you said it yourself right early on. What the hell was you just said it like 15 minutes ago. It was like the main point of this whole conversation we were having. I hate that. You're so interesting. I lose my train of thought just as I'm about to say something.
If there's a theme, it's that you got to understand your own programming. You got to understand the experiences. And you're saying don't dwell on the past. Don't ruminate on the past. And there's too many people who get stuck without thinking about who do I want to become more like? What do I want my future to be like? I get it.
Yeah.
And I'm saying we have a compulsion to repeat, that we ruminate over the past, not out of some kind of character defect, but because there is a problem and we need to, in this improvisational, imaginative way, figure out what the resolution, what the solution, what are we going to do when we encounter this the next time. So I'm the kind of guy who replays conversations in my head, and it'll be like 3 days later. Oh, that's what I want to call her up right now. I just thought of that great comeback that I should have said, Well, it's because I'm rehearsing the conversation. And that it prepares me to think, I should have said this. Then 3 days becomes 3 hours. And then 3 hours becomes 3 minutes. And I get to say, give me a minute. I'm thinking about that. Or I get to say, I want to get my answer right. And then 3 minutes can become 30 seconds. And when you're able to do that in real time, you're doing a lot better.
I have a midswatch. That guy was going through just that, where he talked about, it was like 2 episodes ago, he was talking about like how his problem was he was very good at reading people, he said, but he kept talking about it and telling them what he saw. I make the analogy of like, he kept spouting the rules instead of playing the game. Mm-hmm. And the one guy that was there, Jack Ten of Hearts, another old school married red pill guy, made the case. It's like, so yeah, that's your problem, is that you don't know how to use the information. Like anybody can observe. Observing is easy. Even because I think the guy was artistic. And so he had to like rote memorization. Okay, the body tick there. That means she's angry, that. And then he would just call it out. But yeah, that gap between knowing a thing and being able to implement a thing is what you're talking about. So I totally get that. But it was funny. The solution we kind of had collectively come to on this was the whole idea of guys swapping notes of the field reports. And I found those to be useful. Because like you said, you re-experience this yourself, and I'll just do this again and do it again until I get it right, or until I process what happened. I find that's good, but it's kind of learning the hard way. The better one I found so far anyway is where 100,000 guys are swapping notes about stuff, and it turns out we don't have a lot of variation. Most guy problems are like, if one guy's had it, at least 1,000 guys have had it. And if 10 guys write on it, then everybody's like, oh, they can see themselves in this field report. And when it's somebody else and you're able to step back from your thing, you're way easier to spot it. If somebody's acting unattractive, you're like, dude, what are you doing? I can see you're doing this, this, and this. Yeah. But then when you look into it, you're like, oh, wait, I do that same thing. In that way, you're kind of almost committing self-therapy. I prefer that method only because it's quicker, and the same mistake only has to be made once by one person, and then 10 people learn from it, as opposed to 10 people going through it 3 or 4 times, eventually mulling through.
I got 2 reactions. And I got to make a note so I don't lose them.
Train of thought.
Yeah. So you're talking about knowledge sharing, which is wonderful. Find somebody who's had an analogous experience about what worked for them and what didn't. The only advice any good is, this is what I did and this is what happened. Either it worked for me or it didn't. So here's the 2 reactions. I'm going to come back to that one. The first one is, this is how change happens. There are 4 stages: awareness, judgment, motivation, action. You must be aware of a problem. And if you're not aware, you're not going to make a new future happen, a future that wasn't going to happen by itself. You must be aware that there's an issue, something that you're not satisfied with. Judgment is formulating alternatives and being able to stack rank them. I like this one better than this one. I like that one better than that one. If you're not aware of the problem and you can't formulate alternatives, nothing is going to change. You got to be motivated. It's got to be something that's important to you, that you care about. There might be alternatives, and if you're apathetic, then nothing's going to change. And the last one, action. There's an enormous barrier between motivation and action, and the barrier is called courage, because there's a lot of things that are going to hold you the fuck back, even if you're motivated. So when you're talking to me about the guy who understands the rules and he's explaining them rather than living them, he either lacks motivation, because he might have awareness and he might have judgment. He either lacks motivation or he lacks the courage to act. It's almost always the latter. And so where do we find that courage? Sometimes we find it with our friends and our mates who say, well, this is what happened to me, and this is what was hard, and this is what worked out. This is what really fucking sucked. And it takes the the catastrophizing that we do in our own brain down a little bit to know that it's possible and it worked for someone else. And the other way we do it is in kind of this stress inoculation exposure therapy. We do little tiny things that are courageous, and it builds up our own sort of reservoir of courage. Then we have a little more risky and a little more risky, at least I hope. If we're developmentally, if we're developing well, then we don't have to do the huge courageous thing all at once, but we can build up to that by doing other courageous things. For me, it's an ice bath. For other people, it might be something else. That's my first reaction. Okay, I'm going to stop there. This is a good time for you to share a reaction or an idea. And then I'm going to...
I was just noticing it's we got some convergent evidence going on here.
What's
and
that?
You're talking about your stress inoculation. This came from Tanner Guzzi, the fashion guy, the Mormon, and Rollo were arguing about being well, not arguing, but talking about being zeroed out. And Tanner brought the question, is there any way for a guy to implement this stuff without being zeroed out, without that increase in neuroplasticity, fight or flight thing? And he didn't have an answer. And for the most part, I kind of agree. Like, there's really, like, that kind of has to happen. Because why would you change things if there's not a trauma, right?
Yeah.
If it's not broken, don't fix it, even if it's not optimal. And then I came across, in a totally unrelated thing, the art or the science of killology, which I don't know if you've heard of.
No.
Yeah, World War I, they were finding that 75% of the shots fired weren't fired at targets. They weren't forced projection. They were like intimidation. They were just shooting for the sake of shooting. The military realized in that time, they're like, okay, so how do we, like, that's 3/4 of our effectiveness gone right there. How do we fix that? And it turns out it's because people don't want to kill other people.
Correct.
You've heard all the stories, like Christmas Day, the Germans and the French had a soccer game, shit like that. So how do we do that? And then their plan was, well, we can't turn people into sociopaths. They tried it, or psychopaths. And so killology was the idea of like, well, let's just bypass the whole idea. And that's what they had switched from the old bullseye targets for shooting practice to human silhouettes. Like to this day, that's why if you have like human shaped silhouettes, and I can't vouch for the States, but in Canada, it's actually illegal for firing ranges to use those. They have to use those like amorphous little shapes.
Yeah.
But the military, we still had ones that looked like, they even had the German hat and shit like that, like people. The idea being at 300 yards, that's about what a person looks like. So you shoot at the silhouette, you shoot at the silhouette. Then when you get into combat, it's just instinct to shoot at a silhouette. You don't think of it as a person.
Yep.
And so you were able to do these things that went against your moral code. And there was a whole bunch of examples of it. So when you talk about stress inoculation, it seems like a less murdersome version of that, which makes sense because that's also the approach I've tried to take. Okay, if you're not comfortable with approach because of approach anxiety, start approaching old ladies. Because you don't want to sleep with an old lady.
Flirt with them.
She loves, and she's just as girl as anybody else, and flirt with her.
Tell her you like her hair.
Yeah.
Tell her that's a beautiful sweater she's wearing today. And it doesn't matter if she's 85, she'll say thank you and smile. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, a little flirting too. It's like everybody loves it. Or if you can't even get that far, just ask somebody for the time and thank them for their day. If it's just the whole idea of approaching people. But then, yeah, like you said, it's inoculating you versus it. You're shooting at silhouettes instead of at targets. So that way when a target does come there, then it's just, you don't even have to think about it.
Yep.
And then for your other part, awareness, judgment, motivation, action. Is there a container, like a term for that? Like, is there a scientist that came up with it that
I read it in a paper called Moral Conation. And, it's an academic kind of thing. And goddamn, the word conation, which means a lot to me, CONATION, incredibly important. I've written on that too. It is your instinctive problem-solving strengths. It is essential for you to understand the way your instincts are wired. Until I came to understand my instinctive problem-solving strengths, I didn't know who the fuck I was. I didn't understand why I created chaos in my life. And the answer is, I need novelty. It's not a nice to have. I need a new thing. And you can imagine how difficult that is in a committed, exclusive, monogamous relationship, which I was for 17 years with my wife. Well, where is that need for the new thing going to come from? For me, it can happen intellectually. It can happen in a startup environment. It can happen in lots of places. But if I don't get that new thing, I will be frustrated and I will break shit in my life. Just see what happens, because I'm
dude, that's common as shit.
yes. And I want to say it's not my fault. Here's what I'm getting at. This energy, part of me is become a scientist because I'm an experimentalist. An experimentalist. This energy says, if it ain't broke, break it. And can be so. How did I wind up in jail?
Were you like me as a kid and you took apart stereos just to see if you could put them back together, so you had parts everywhere and you lost screws?
No, Ryan, because I put them back together and got them working.
Thank you, doctor. That's why I got That's why I got a couple bachelors and you got a PhD.
You became an artist. I became an engineer. I'll show you how a soldering iron works, right?
Yeah. So back to the thoughts. OODA loops. That sounds exactly like an OODA loop.
What's an OODA?
That was an Air Force term that came up with it. It was observe, orient, decide, act. The idea was for the Air Force, the faster that one person was able to cycle through this in an engagement, the more likely they were to win. And that's how American air superiority kind of came through in the Second World War. But I kind of mapped them like, okay, so, observe, awareness, that makes sense. Judgment, orient, makes sense. Motivation, to decide, makes sense. And then act. So I'm wondering, well, that's what the thing is. I'm wondering if there's been any cross-pollination of those two concepts between the moral conation paper and the Air Force OODA loops. Because if not, I think it'll be fascinating. I'm a huge fan of convergent evidence, by the way. The idea that two different disciplines are both pointing in the same direction, it kind of gives more credibility to the evidence. Well, but the point I was curious on in the last part here, before I lose this train of thought, is the self-sabotage you were talking about. Happens.
Bullshit concept.
Well, it happens, like the way you described it, it happened a lot with guys. They would have their anger. Well, maybe not the words, but hear me out here.
Yeah.
Guy would be in his anger phase. He would make some changes, make himself more attractive. It was like that fire under his ass, the foot in his ass, whatever you want to call it, motivated him to make the changes he needed to make. And then things got to a state of normalcy. The anger went away, but then the guy didn't know how to, what do I do now? And they would actively start doing things to like fuck up their relationship a little bit, just so she would do some shit to make him angry again, so that he had that motivation to do it again, and end up with this weird cycle of a guy becoming attractive and then unattractive just because he didn't have any internal motivation outside of anger. And you saw that on guys, and you were watching them, and every time it happened, the cycle got worse, right? Because there's less trust. Correct. Because is this change real this time, or is this another one of the cycles? Yep. And it's all subconscious. And they eventually crashed and burned. So that's first thing I thought of when you started talking about that. But I guess it sounds like self-sabotage may not be the most accurate term.
I object to the metaphor, because you're not a terrorist in your own life. You're working on a problem. I learned this from my ex-wife now, right? But I learned this when I was married and discovered that my wife was an alcoholic, and it was my daughter that brought it to my attention, which really fucking sucked, because I felt like an idiot for not knowing it, but at least my daughter figured it out.
Yeah.
I had to, I went to Al-Anon, and they said, "You're an asshole." And I said, whoa.
What the fuck?
I go, I'm treating my wife like an equal partner, and I'm considering her feelings, and I'm thinking about what she wants. And they're like, "That's why you're an asshole."
Oh, because you're enabling.
No. They said, "You're treating your wife as if she was a grown-up. She is a brain-damaged drunk. She is incapable of putting together thoughts that make any sense. Her judgment is not to be trusted, and her own brain is incoherent. How dare you put responsibility for the quality of your marriage and your life on her by asking her what she wants or what she feels?" Or they're like, "You're an asshole because you're married to a brain damaged drunk that you're trying to treat like she has a healthy brain and she's a grown up." And I walked out of Al-Anon like, what the fuck just happened, and realized they were right. I had to take charge of my marriage. So I remember driving along and saying to my wife, "I'm 100% decision making now. You get no decisions." And she says, "Why?" I said, "Because you're a brain damaged drunk." And she said, "That sounds right." She was in her program by then, and she had sufficient self-awareness to know that her judgment was not to be trusted.
Well, did the actions mirror up with that statement? That's the thing.
long enough to get her through like 10 and a half steps, maybe
Okay.
11. Yeah. She sobered up. She lost a lot of weight. She got off her blood pressure medication. I never stopped being sexually attracted to her. I was so locked in.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked the fact that she looked better. The problem was that we had to relearn sex as sober people. Because the other thing that I learned in Al-Anon is they said, find out what you're getting from her drinking and cut yourself off from that thing. Because you will enable her to get what you want from her drinking. They weren't accusing me of enabling her. They're saying you're going to do it until you cut yourself off from the and what I was
it's not an accusation, it's a consequence.
So I began to understand myself better. I cut myself off from sex. I said, we're not having sex unless you're stone cold sober, which really fucking sucked. And that because it turns out she didn't know how to have sex stone cold sober. And so we were like teenagers all over again, trying to figure things out, trying to communicate about what worked and what we liked and stuff. It was really awkward. And then we went to one of those therapy sessions because we're in couples therapy, and they can be very dangerous. It was couples counseling, and the counselor said, well, how do you feel, Tom? And I deferred. I'm like, well, this isn't really about me right now, and this blah, 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 blah. And they freaking this is me saying, they drag it out of me. I was like, okay, these are my feelings as best as I understand them. And we were divorced before we were back in the minivan because she was so angry and dysregulated that she had, for about the 13th time, told me that she wanted a divorce. And at that point, I'd cultivated enough emotional affairs to understand that I didn't want to be married to a woman who didn't want to be married to me. I would have better options. And we split up.
Yeah.
So why am I going through all that? I wound up reading a lot about addiction and a lot about codependence, because when I took over the decision-making authority for the relationship and the marriage, I needed to know what I was working with. And I realized that alcoholism is not a problem. Alcoholism is a search for a solution. This is why I'm rejecting the idea of self-sabotage. The cycle that you were talking about in the story that you were telling, this guy is working on a problem. He probably doesn't even know the fucking problem that he's working on. And he is persistent and he's hardworking and he's going to keep trying because that's how important the problem is. And
it ain't fucking up this marriage by hell or hell water until I find out why.
He's determined until he figures it out. He's going to do it again and again. That's not sabotage. That is a persistent, hard-working guy who just doesn't know what the fuck to work on.
So I need a pithy 2 or 3 word thing to tweet with that. What replaces self-sabotage as the container word for it?
I don't know.
I have to wordsmith this thing.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Come up with that. Because self-sabotage is not it. The people who are undergoing these recurring patterns, they're not sabotaging themselves. They're working on something. They're incompetent. Like they need a new tool or a new awareness, but motivation is not their problem. So, the tool metaphor, maybe they need a screwdriver instead of a hammer, and they can go to Al-Anon or they can go somewhere else, or they can read a book and they say, well, here's a different way of thinking about it. Or here's what you misunderstand about the world. Here's the other thing to try. Here's the new experiment. And this gets back to finding someone else who's knowledgeable because they've gone through an analogous experience and saying, well, what worked for them or what didn't work for them? There is a point, not in everyone's life, but there's a point in my life where I'm running out of people to talk to. You say there's 1,000 other guys who've done it. And I think that you are 99% correct. When I look at me, I'm trying to be honest with myself without falling prey to ego gratification.
Right.
There are not a lot of people who become tenured academics. There are in engineering. There are, hundreds of people for me to select from who are older than me, who've accomplished analogous things, and I can find them. I'm just saying there aren't 1,000.
Your world is smaller, is what you're saying.
Right. But the principle still applies. I have my mentors in academia and some people whom I admire who are very important to me. And they can say things like, well, when I was under this situation, okay, here's the difficulty. there are very few people who have started new engineering companies, succeeded with them, and scaled them. And now
From
I'm
an
in,
academic career background.
you got it.
Yeah.
Who's the freaking guy who's trying what I'm trying to do, which is keep these two worlds, keep them compatible, scale a company without, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. I might have to give up my teaching or my academic career, which kind of sucks, but whatever the hell. The universities have gone to shit and it's not what I signed up for. It's just, there's going to be grief associated with the loss of that imagined future and the feeling that I'm giving up on the institution that I'd committed my life to if I leave it instead of attempt to reform. So
What's
I got
that like, Doc?
yeah, exactly. Right. So what am I trying to do? I'm trying to scale a company goddamn hard. Almost nobody gets to the stage that I'm at right now. I'm trying to reform an institution that wants to chew me up and spit me out and shit all over my reputation. And I'm trying to get my act together and have a healthy, committed relationship that fosters a rewarding family that I find satisfying. And I'm not doing real good on that last one.
Well, define good. It's not perfect yet, obviously. There's more work to do, but you know what I mean? Good is such a vague descriptor. I always never liked that. Is it moving in the right direction? I find that to be more accurate.
Well, here's
and obviously it's not going to be moving fast enough for your tastes, but that's kind of the way. If it is moving fast enough, then that means you didn't aim high enough either, right? So I kind of think that little bit of neuroticism is kind of part of the process. I could be mistaken. I haven't 2 millioned anything yet, so except for real estate. Thank you, inflation. Yeah.
Especially in Toronto. All right, so here's, I don't know. Like, I agree with you. Good is a shortcut word, and it's an oversimplification that maybe doesn't do it justice. I'm worried about it. I'm anxious about it. My family blew up because of this divorce, and for whatever reason, maybe it's some other unaddressed trauma. I want a family. I want a family the way my father wanted one, and he was willing to lie, cheat, and steal to get one. And I don't want to be that guy. There's some of this, like you were saying,
how bad do you want it?
Mothers to not be our fathers. There could be something about me that has that need because the family I grew up in was a pack of lies, and the family that I created has dissolved. Something about me wants to really get it right this time,
Oh, replacing our fathers. Yeah, dude, this is something not related to you, but it's it related to what you said there. We call them power dads. There's a lot of them on Twitter and that, where they talk about their kids as if like they're teaching their dad a lesson. Look, I can fucking do it. How do you fuck this up so bad? Or like they treat their kids as an extension of their ego. It's like everything that fucked up my childhood, I'm never going to give it to him ever.
Yeah.
There's other guy, Lasek. He's another Mormon ghostwriter, and he said that he was worried about, like, if I raise my kids to have all the things I never had, how will I make sure that they don't take it for granted? Because you know how a lot of kids get that way and they do that? And I go, why don't you just raise them the way your dad raised you? Because it seemed to work for you. And he's like, it's too dark. That's cynical. And I'm like, is it though? It kind of has that inference that I could handle it. I was tough enough to survive and weather this stuff. But my kid, he couldn't take that. He's too fragile. Nobody else but me could do it. And he does got that narcissism to it. And so I just found, and a lot of the dads
say about that too. Do you want your kids strong or safe?
Oh, good point.
Yeah. However, I became a father unaware of the way that I was going to try and use my child to relive my own childhood from a position of control. And if I could do it over, I would increase my awareness. I would formulate alternatives. There's no question of motivation. And I would find the fucking courage to do it differently.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? There are a lot of parents, they say they don't want to be their kid's friend, but then they act like... I don't know what your parenting style's like. I'm just speaking of the power dad syndrome here. So don't take any of this like I'm asking questions on it. But I find, yeah, there's always that common shit with them too. They always, as soon as you bring up this very obvious like ego extension or bad parenting strategy they may be using, because I was the son of a failed parenting strategy, I get it. They always say, "Oh, you don't know, you're not a dad," which I love. Nick August, his kids just left the house a couple years ago, and he always hops in. He's like, "Well, I'm a dad, and both my kids just moved out a couple years back." No, he's pretty much right. Because I think guys assume I'm just sitting here running my mouth about how smart I am, when it's really just like I listen to other people, and then the things that they do that mirror what I've experienced, or the things that other dads agree. Like, you just kind of take that. It's like an academic, right? You're not telling people engineering principles because you just thought them up. It's like, no, I've read all the engineers and they've done all this shit and it's worked, and this is just the information passing it along. That's what I love about it. Like, there's no ego into it. It's just, okay, this works, this doesn't work. And granted, it sounds like I take it a little far, where I'm like, fuck it then. Just start again. You're old enough. You can start another family. You're like, well, kind of fix your shit first. So it's kind of nice to have that more empathic second thought here.
I'm going to live a long life. I'm going to keep myself young. And if a family is what I want and what I want to do, I'm going to be fit enough to do that. I'm not saying I'd have to start from scratch, like find a fertile woman and impregnate her. This is part of where I disagree with Rich Cooper. Never date single women. There are never date single moms. There are perils associated with that. You can go into those relationships with an awareness of the problems that she's trying to solve, and it can be okay. There can be a role for her in your life, and it might be a role in which her children are welcome. My daughter had another insight. She was listening to me rant about something, and she said, "Dad, you're going to have to face up to something." Well, what is that? And she goes, "You are not attracted to her despite her kids. You're more attracted to her because of her kids."
Oh my God, that's a military insta families.
Yeah,
common as fuck.
I felt like shit to read it because I knew that it applied to me. Yep.
I'm almost thinking, when you're saying your world is getting smaller, you might have to find some like retired military guys, because I have a feeling they'll probably be closer to your perspective than a lot of the academic types. Literally being in an organization, and dude, there's nobody who's been in the military over 10 years who's not cynical and jaded towards the military at all. Like, do you know, when you put your 20th or 25th year, depending on your type of contract in, they actually have a word for it. They call it the 30-30 rule. 30 seconds to piss me off, 30 days I'm gone. Do you feel like the cynicism behind that statement? Best guys to work with, like zero bullshit. And there's so many little things like that. It is what it is. Like, a kind of learned helplessness that the system is broken, that you can't change it, so you just kind of suck it up. Or embrace the suck. Hurry up and wait. Everything about the military is about being jaded to it. Fuck, that was mine. I put up with so much shit. I worked hard. I was like top tier sailor, naval communicators, top of my class, all American boy, except for it was Canadian. The only difference is I didn't play hockey. And I remember that because it was always like, you're going to need this shit when you deploy, man. So I'm like, yes, I'm ready. That was and then I got to the deployment and it was such bullshit. Yeah. Oh, fuck. CNN did this news report on it, and I was like, holy fuck, I want on that deployment. Those guys are hunting pirates and taking out terrorists. Sounds great. Ours, some electrician fucked like 4 people in her department. They were starting fist fights. They had to send her home. A steward, she was fucking a whole bunch of people in the departments. They had to send her home. So it was basically like just a bunch of people cheating on their wives with frumpy 4s on ship. And if you've never fucked on ship, it's this mix of like body odor, diesel, and like a Cheeto smell. It's very unique. You'll know it when you smell it. It's just not a seductive scent. Appealing. No, but well, it's appealing for nostalgia. If you haven't been exposed to it for 10 years, you probably wouldn't like it. But me, as soon as I smell it, I get like seasick nostalgically. I
don't want olfactory flashbacks.
I don't know. It's just funny because every time I hear you talk about your academic stuff, I'm like, it mirrors so well with the public service there. Especially now that there's no war.
Yeah. Why'd you join the Navy?
I got drunk and bored. Yeah, okay. I wish I could say it was more than that. Like, here, I was doing graphic design, I'd been in it for a couple years, 2 years, maybe 3. Yeah, because I joined the military at 23. I graduated from university when I was 20. So in between that time, I was a graphic designer. The money sucked. The work wasn't gratifying. Financially, wasn't as well off as I could be. I was just getting drunk with a friend. Somehow the conversation got to how my dad was a paratrooper, did a tour as a paratrooper. And he's like, yeah, my dad did some military stuff too. It's like, oh, that'd be cool. So we got drunk. We called up the recruiting office, passed out, didn't think any of it. Next day, fucking paperwork's at our doorstep. We're like, oh shit. And I just was like, meh, I think I must have known what I was doing when I started. I just trusted my judgment. He chickened out though. And that was literally it. Like I realized, do you know how many decisions I've made, major life decisions I made where I was just drunk? So many of them. The military, my first house, my second house. I got blitzed when I went house shopping. And I actually was very happy with my choices, but I just didn't do it sober, which is weird. I'm not a drinker, but when I binge, I binge. The only major decision I didn't make drunk was leaving the military. That one was dead sober.
Do you remember the difference between motivation and action is the courage barrier?
Yeah. Well, that kind of makes sense when you bring up the alcohol for sure.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think I argued with you on that one.
It's not just that you were drunk and bored. You were drunk and bored, but it's not just that you were drunk and bored. There was more going on. Your dad was a paratrooper. Okay.
Yeah, but he also worked on the oil rigs. I didn't decide to do that either, right?
Right.
As for why, I couldn't tell you. It was a very flippant conversation and decision.
No, I think something had been...
Maybe.
Because you didn't chicken out. Because you didn't chicken out, there was something else that it was longer lasting.
Well, I know the way I've thought about it is like, if I make a decision, I trust I knew what I was doing when I made it, even if I don't understand it later. Because I found for a lot of things where you back out of, it's because you start second guessing your own judgment. So I just didn't do that.
Yep.
And then it was the narrative, Queen and Country. I liked that idea. That was the big reason I left. A lot of people thought it was because a very vindictive command chain tried charging me with like espionage and a whole bunch of shit and a bunch of infractions. Oh, yeah, you didn't know? Jeffrey Delisle, a Canadian spy, worked for the military in Halifax's intelligence area, and he was selling stuff to the Ruskies. He got arrested, charged with espionage, sent to prison, went to Club Ed. And it was right around that time, everybody in the military was like looking for spies. And so anytime anything happened, they always had, well, is this a spy? It's military will always, everything is panic and then you walk it back. I just happened to be the right place at the right time. I got hit by a car in Montreal when I first moved there for this new job. And because of that, I had got, a couple weeks off while I was recovering, basically shattered a lot of shit in me. I gotten so far behind on work, I started taking shortcuts because of the pressure, which was, I should have let things fail. That's how you're supposed to do it, but whatever. And then one of the shortcuts ended up just biting me ass. It gave somebody the reason they needed to go look into this stuff. It ended up nothing ever came of it. It was 14 months of absolute hell. Punishment without due diligence. I didn't even know for 6 months what had happened. Nobody told me anything. They just acted like I had killed the president. Until finally I had an MP investigation. I don't know if it's legal, but I have it recorded on an old cell phone. And I still have that recording here. And I listen to it once in a while. I still have my file up here too. I always keep in mind, never where I forgot. And I remember the one thing I said there, you want to talk about courage, is when the cop was interviewing me, they asked at one point, is there anything else you did wrong? Or is there anything wrong you did that you want to tell us? And I remember I felt like a fucking Law and Order tough guy. I'm like, I'm not here to do your fucking job for you. So am I free to go? I was like, oh, that sounded badass. But yeah, I think a lot of that, the courage thing is I just gronk it. Sometimes if like I make a decision and you know what, I would rather follow the decision through and then fix whatever happens wrong than second guess myself and then half-ass it or not do anything at all. As for a reason, I couldn't tell you. I've just seen it happen enough to know that that's how I act. And so either make it work for me or change how I act. And it's been working. So does that any of that make sense or was that a little rambly?
It was pretty good. I'm admiring that approach.
I don't know if that's the right word to use, but I'll tell you this much. The give a fuck factor, gaff factor drops to 0 once you've done it a couple times. Well, you know what I mean? Because you realize this. Like, yeah, leaving the military, it actually took me twice. I chickened out the first time, but the second time I followed through. It was the first time I think I ever Well, first off, made a decision sober, but secondly, that I backed off the first time. But after doing it a couple times, you realize, like, even if it's the wrong decision, like, you'll recover. You got skills. I know, and I don't mean for you. Like, let's say you decide I'm going to leave academia, do my business full time. And let's say something happens that wasn't ideal because of that. You're not an idiot. You got a PhD. You've got good skills. Like, engineers are really good at problem solving. And even if let's say this business tanks 6 months later, you know now how to get a business that far, right? So even if it's the wrong decision, you can still recover from it and do fairly well for yourself. And I think, I don't know if you do, but I think you know that. I'm hoping you do anyway. If not, I'm telling you.
No, you're all correct on those. I do worry about hurting other people along the way because I have a strong white knight martyr complex inside me. Thank you, Mom.
But they trust you. Like, that's why your girl's with you. My girl did that. I actually thanked her one day, a real heartfelt moment. I'm like, hey, when I decided to just start like writing and YouTube and the podcast full time, and you didn't, no doubts, nothing. You're like, yeah, you got it, babe. I said, thanks. And I realized that's because he's like, yeah, I knew you'd figure it out. That, and when I went online to see you had 10,000 Twitter followers, so I'm like, clearly you actually have some skill at this. But you know what I mean? Like, that's leadership. When you can make a change like that and they just trust that you can follow through.
How does she know that when you become a big celebrity, rich and successful with thousands of followers on Twitter, that you'll stay with her?
Probably the same reason I do. She trusted her decision when she made it. We've never had that conversation. We never have.
Never had that.
The worst it got is when I had a girl on the show here. She's like, who's that bitch? But that's like it.
Of course she's going to say that.
Yeah. That's a strip club. No, I don't know. Never. I never gave her a reason to doubt it, I guess, is the big reason. Like, well, I don't hide my cell phone. And she's been good to me, so why would I even want to, like, put that idea in her? I think that's the part about fidelity that people don't get. It's not about impropriety. It's about the perception of impropriety. The girls' night out, great example of that. Our girl wants to go out with her friends to Vegas for a weekend. I'm not going to cheat. I'm just going to have fun with them. And maybe she is. But that she's unaware that the perceived impropriety is already there. That's already a big red flag. And I just don't put myself in those positions where she has to question. Because I don't want to. Because she treats me well enough and she does well enough for me and I'm happy here, right? But that's kind of a knowing what I want thing, like you said, with the relationship.
What was the exclusivity talk with your girlfriend like when you had it?
Nothing up the skirt, nothing down the throat. That's literally it. And it's funny because it sounds so flippant, but you think it through and you're like, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
Yeah. Nothing down the throat, nothing up the skirt.
And how did you bring it up when you said, I want to be exclusive?
Oh, that's at the end of the book. Do you want me to spoil it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was dating a stripper at the time. Her name was Jade. 21, but she looked like 28 because of the pills. And we had a foreign port in Vancouver at the time, and she happened to be working in Vancouver that day, so I poured it there and like, yeah, we'll hook up, we'll have some fun. And she kind of flaked. So I got pissed and annoyed, and I just like, fuck it, I'm going to go do my own thing. I was in Vancouver at the time. And she was a girl I was plating, the one I'm with now. She was just a plate at the time, but she was always fun. And she was on a date in Vancouver at the same time, and she just called because she wanted to vent. I guess the guy got handsy, and she basically blew him off for whatever reason. I guess his dad was, Working for the Weekend, that song?
Yeah.
His dad was one of the guys of that band, so he was like a rich kid, and she's like, whatever. And then she's like, it just sucks I'm in Vancouver, because I'd probably just come over to hang out. And I'm like, hey, fun fact, I'm in Vancouver. My buddy Will, French guy, he actually had this bondage party he was going to in East Hastings, which if you don't know, that's the Oakland of Canada. Fucking dangerous area. And I was like, well, I have this party I'm going to. You want to come? She goes, sure. So we ended up at this bondage party. Bunch of people getting whipped. It was pretty fun. There's stories in there, but I won't bore you with that. We fooled around, and then the next morning, hungover, we just went to have brunch. Had some Caesars. Total Canadian thing, by the way. A Caesar is like Clamato juice, but it's a Bloody Mary.
Okay.
And I just sat there, and I kind of was like hungover, and eyes are closed, and her eyes are closed, and we're just enjoying each other's company. And I'm like, I was dating a lot of girls. And I'd had this girl as a plate since she was 19. Mm-hmm. She's 23 now, but we took some time off. I had a deployment in the middle there, but for a solid year, she never did anything to make me think, oh, fuck, like to next her, to kick her to the curb, right? An entire year. And I thought about it. I'm like, dude, I was like, the last 20 girls, every single one of them gave me an easy reason to say, you know what, I'm done with this one. Or she was like, I'm done with you. And I'm like, you know what? Let's give this a shot. After a year, it didn't have a single reason to get rid of her. So I'm like, let's give this thing 90 days, see what happens. She goes, all right,
Mm-hmm.
sure. She was hungover. She didn't care either. It was literally as flippant as joining the military.
Mm-hmm.
And for her, it was great because I lived right near the bars. So she could go out to the bars, then just come home and stay with me. I was working night shift. So we both got off work at 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Just head home, smash, and go to bed, and then wake up in the morning. And she'd make burritos. It was awesome. And that's literally it. Like, it wasn't a big decision at all. It's just, let's try it out. And then at that point, she invested in the relationship. She fostered the relationship. I had the nice place. I had the Nissan Sentra, the nice car, and I was fun. Oh, bitches love fuel efficiency, man. You have no idea. No idea. And then they always make fun of it. You're not like my 2-seater Camaro. You're like, okay, fine. All of a sudden, 3 friends want to come and join you at the bar. You're like, oh, now I'm the popular guy with the seating space. And so this was after we got back from deployment, and we had a 6-month break where they were just like, okay, use all your leave up, take 6 months off, and then come back to work. So we had parties like every couple days, like 20 people in my house. My house was a party central. So she loved it. She was like, I basically live at a bar and then go to a bar and then come back to the bar. I'm like, yeah, exactly. So for her, it was a blast. And then we just kind of, it turns out she was good at renovating. I had to have my whole floor renovated. I had this horrible wainscoting pressboard brick pattern on the wall that she fixed up. And I'm like, holy shit, she's useful as fuck. Her dad came in, redid my entire bathroom. We got rid of the tub. We put one of those stand-up showers with like the multiple heads. And then she always asks, why do you love me? And I'm like, because you can drywall. So yeah, I guess the easy answer was, yeah, for an entire year, I had no reason to get rid of her. She couldn't give me one, and I was looking. Does that answer your question?
It does help. And I can see differences between your situation and mine.
Oh, probably. Here, I'm putting this up for later.
Okay.
Finish your thought first, then we'll go to this.
We'll go to this now.
I pour my heart out. You're like, pass. All right.
I never went through the phase that you went through of spinning plates, not in the way that you did when I was a young man. Yeah. I did not emerge from my 20s with confidence in myself sexually. I got married to a woman who was a single mom because I wanted to have a family, and she was so sexy to me when I was 29. I'm like, okay, I could live the rest of my life with fucking just this one woman. This meets a standard that I hadn't experienced until then in my life. And I had a lot of unresolved kinds of things. When I got divorced, some part of me reverted back to kind of like the age I was when I got married. Some part of me developmentally returns to my 20s. And that's when, I didn't know about spinning plates at the time, but that's when I was dating non-monogamously. And some of that fucked with my head. It was really difficult for me to get over the kinds of issues, the kind of nagging thoughts that go in your head when you find that you want a relationship to grow and you care about somebody. I remember asking my mentor, how did he deal with the idea that just any one of the plates that he was dating was dating other people? And the context of the conversation was he knew that I was struggling with these thoughts. And he said, well, when she showed up back at my door, I figured it was because I was better. And, that was
That's his dog walker. I love it.
What?
Oh, dog. Okay, you're not at that chapter either. I'm not even going to spoil that, but it's that exact same thing I had with this girl called the dog walker.
Yep.
It was keep going. I don't want to hijack this.
Well, it was some consolation, but there was still a lot of shit to deal with. And I reached a point at which, we had relationship rules. And the one that I am with now broke the rules, and that was really troubling. And I
In a good way or a bad way, broke the rules?
say what?
Like, were they beneficial at the end, or were they like rules that you shouldn't have broken, kind of thing?
Rules that shouldn't have been broken.
Gotcha, gotcha.
And I thought about it. I thought about my failures as a leader. How did I put her in a position that incentivized her or allowed her to break the rules? Like, first person I'm trying to examine here, I'm so angry, but I'm looking at myself because I'm the leader in that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be unfair for me to fail to acknowledge that I'm the leader in the way I organize my life. I'm the leader in 95% of the relationships I have.
Yeah, you control you.
And I'm so influential. So in any case, I thought about my failures of leadership, and that's an insufficient explanation. And then I thought, what problem was she trying to solve? What was she working on? What drove her to do that? And I wrote about this in the article. I said, man, there was a lot of anger. And then it came down to this. I said, I know you're a good person, and I know you're a moral person. And for you to do what you did must mean that you're working on some deep psychological issue. So she wrote back, and she didn't have to. She could have said, fuck you and your amateur psychoanalysis, which would have resolved the whole thing. But she didn't. She wrote back and she said, what do you think it is? Well, fuck.
What a great non-answer. I can see how you feel that. Fuck.
I told her what I thought it was, and it opened up a whole new phase of our relationship in which I felt deeply in love, not just attracted to the woman, because I'd always been attracted, enjoy her company, all the things that she brings out in me that I like about myself. All those things are true. But when, as a consequence of what she did and our response to it, and as a consequence of the honesty and the work that she was doing on herself, then my admiration of her and my desire for her went way up. And it motivated me to work on some of my other shit. So when you say, you can make a bad decision, but you can figure it out. I joined the military in a flippant way, made a lifelong commitment of submission on a whim because I was drunk. There is something about you that says the important thing here is graphic arts isn't working. I'm not making any money. I'm stuck in this girly job that I'm good at and never going to get paid for. I'm going to run a new experiment, and it's a big fucking experiment, and it's going to challenge me in ways that require me to figure it out. So that's what I'm admiring that. In my own case, I'm applying it to, this proverb about maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. Bad things happen, and they make you seem like morally decrepit people. I want to take the moral judgment out of it. They destroy trust. But the fact is, something wasn't working. Something had to change. In your case, working as a graphic artist wasn't working. And so you did something drastic and radical. And here's the important thing, irrevocable. Because once you sign the fucking papers, you don't get to a week later go, on second thought, the penny saver has an opening, and I could maybe put together a couple of coupon ads or so.
Yeah, you don't get 2 weeks notice.
Right. So the idea of this irrevocable commitment to something that says, I got to figure this out. It's very appealing, and I admire it because Andy Andrews would say you burnt your boats. He's talking about Cortez.
Oh yeah, that one.
The Aztecs. He says, well, once there's no evacuation vehicles, you're gonna fucking fight to the death, and they won.
Yeah.
So
and at the same time too, and I left it wasn't working for me, so I left that and I started doing corporate, and corporate wasn't working for me. I left that, and there's always that and I'm with you, the navel gazy. There's always the concern is like, are you just running away from your problems? And
I don't think so.
No, I'm not. But the point is, you do think, give it a second thought just in case. It's always good to have that sober second thought, literally sober second thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, I never knew what I wanted, but I was really good at finding out what I didn't want. And so I just worked on getting all the I didn't wants out of my system. And then I have much less things to choose from now.
Well, that's helpful. Despite the fact that I read Rollo and I follow you and I'm steeped in this red pill stuff that is really
You
targeted,
poor bastard.
right?
Yeah.
Well, I've got a lot out of it, but there's very little of it that is written for 55-year-old men. Most of it is written for 20-something guys.
Yeah.
I figured out what I don't want. I don't want plates because it's a lot of fucking work, and I don't have time for that. I know the plates are supposed to spin themselves, but I'm not interested.
Well, that's one of the reasons to get in a relationship is so that effort you could have put into maximizing your plates, you can put into maximizing a business or something else. But
Correct.
you don't have to worry. Like I'm not good with girls. Like you don't have to worry about that. That's a problem you've already solved. So
I didn't know that. I mean, I had to prove that to myself.
yeah,
And
you did, and then you moved on.
The moving on part is what I'm working on in this relationship right now. I'm going through this thing. She's been distraught by my openness to other women. And I'm like, well, if this relationship were working in a committed way, the way I wanted it, then I wouldn't need any of these other women. But you're kind of putting the challenge on her. And I'm rethinking it because when I finally slept with somebody else, I didn't tell her about it. And I got, reasons and technicalities and crap like that. And then she asked me, and then I did tell her, and it hurt her. And I was like, well, what is going on with me? And I'm thinking about that part. But there was some part of me that created that catastrophe because the relationship as it was not working.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's on her. I'm saying that we were in a relationship. The state of our relationship wasn't working, and it wasn't taking us to like some higher level of quality in our life, and did something drastic. And I don't know what's going to come out the other side. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's bad. Maybe we'll figure it out. Maybe we won't.
Two things. Wine More Please, the guy I was talking about before, he actually had a really good series on that, like how to handle accusations of infidelity. Having a girl asked the question, and he was like 101 level. Here's the thing you say. It's like, and I guess this came up in his life. I don't want to get into specifics, but it was just, do you really want to know? As the first answer. Mm-hmm. Do you really want to know? Or if I do, you'll be the first one I tell. Which I think gets to the same problem you had talked about. If I get to the point where I decide to sleep with somebody else, like you'll know why it's happening. It won't be a surprise. It won't be because of some mental demons I'm going on with side. It's with some structural problem that you... And he's like, I've made it very clear what I need and what I want in a relationship through my actions. And so if you're not fulfilling it for a length of time, and then I start being more absent, like there shouldn't be any surprise to it. To which his second answer was like, and this is like the 201 level one, where she asks like, are you cheating on me? It's like, do you actually want to know? The idea being, I told you before that when it happens, you'll know. And the second part being, okay, do you want to know? The idea that it should be obvious by now. Are you acting stupid, or are you pretty sure and you just want to know? Now it's like, I'm paraphrasing it, so I should probably pull it up if I can find it here. But the second part was kind of neat, how you talk about things being good or being bad. There's a great post by Whisper, one of the original guys. He's actually in his 50s, if I'm not mistaken, late 40s, early 50s, where he talks about how the difference between a red-pilled praxeology and what you would call a blue-pilled, anything that's not red-pilled, is a moral subjectivism versus a moral objectivism. Like, things aren't good or bad. They are good for some people and bad for others. So, like, when you said I wasn't acting good, that was my first thought, is like, well, good for who?
Right.
Probably good for you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done it. You don't seem like the kind of guy who would self-flagellate because you get off on bad for you. And possibly bad for a girl or somebody else. But then and then it's that moral gray area. But it kind of makes you understand. I think you're kind of addressing that through the whole last 2 hours anyway, where it's, this didn't happen for no reason. Like, sleeping with somebody didn't happen out of a fucking vacuum. There was things that led to it, more than just hot girl was available and I'm following my instincts.
Correct.
Yeah. Anyways, they're both really neat ones on that. And I just think it's neat. And I know you say it's not designed for guys in their 50s, but I think it actually is more than you care to admit. It's just the problem is that nobody in his 20s is looking at that stuff. So it's largely on a small YouTube channel or like a collection of posts from the last 7 years that I've got hidden on a folder somewhere. Like off the top of my head, I know the oldest guy I knew was called, his first account was Over 60 Stupid Loner. And he eventually switched over to one called Fire Tempered. 65, oldest guy I know of in the red pill. And then Frenchie, he was early 60s. He had his unicorn and she died, cancer or something like that, when he was like 59, 58. And she made him promise that he would move on after and start dating. And that was his problem, was that everybody he tried to date, he kept comparing to his wife. And they had been high school sweethearts, his first, right? So nobody was ever going to compare. And so the idea is I started explaining to him the concept of just a sport fuck. Like, a hate fuck or a sport fuck. Sometimes removing that sex and intimacy thing. Like, yeah, you can sleep with this girl. She doesn't have to be better than your wife. She just has to be available. Don't care, got laid. And he kind of took what he needed from that and he rolled and he ended up getting some plate. He said in the Appalachian Mountains, he was some artisanal bread maker and he'd roll up there every now and again, fuck her in the mountains, then go back and hang with his family. And that was cool. Both those guys, I loved their stories too, because high school sweetheart was the one. The other guy was like financier, like one of those New York stockbroker types, fucked everything in the 80s. So when you hear all these guys talking about these new problems now with Tinder and shit, and they just kind of laugh, it's like, well, in 1984, while Van Halen was playing, that's that same shit. Here's what you did. And I was like, holy fuck, that's awesome. Turns out our problems aren't so different after all, and Tinder didn't really make women into hoes. It just made the hoes more visible. Mm-hmm. Or what do they say? They're not making thoughterly more thoughterly. They're just filming it. Mm-hmm. I butchered that Will Smith quote. But I guess we've been rambling about that a bit. I'm curious, actually. So Pat Stedman's Polish passport. Thank you for the $10 super chat. There's an inside joke in that. I'll explain it later if you want. What's your thought about the recent press of men's declining college enrollment? Is it worrisome? Is it useless navel gazing? Or are we on to something and society will be okay?
Men aren't going to college because college is not a good deal for men.
Ooh.
The university has created an environment that is hostile to men. Men sense this and they don't sign up. So now women are the majority at every level of education. And it's been a trend since the 70s, this sort of feminization of the university. But there was a salient moment during the Obama administration in which the Secretary of Education wrote what's called a Dear Colleague letter. In the United States, it meant they were going to ramp up enforcement of Title IX. Title IX says that we may not create an environment on campus that is hostile to essentially to women in its application, but the way it's written, it's gender neutral. Title IX was passed back in the 70s because there was big discrepancies in athletic scholarships available to women, for example. Mm-hmm. And it made higher education more accessible to men on male terms. And if you remember in the 70s, I know you were very young at the time, but there was a movement for the Equal Rights Amendment. My mother was one of the political activists at the forefront of that movement. So, we went from a civil rights movement to, Rollo says there's no waves of feminist movement, but this resurgence of the feminist movement and the idea that a constitutional amendment guaranteeing equal rights for women was required. Well, they got Title IX instead. And when the Obama administration issued the Dear Colleague letter threatening universities who did not interpret Title IX in accordance with this gynocentric agenda, the universities responded. They responded by hiring Black female women at all levels of their administration to, now I'm exaggerating to some extent, but
I get it.
This is the case, to enforce Title IX. To enforce Title IX in this way overreached respect.
Which would make sense. If you're afraid of a consequence, obviously you want to go above and beyond to show that you're doing the good thing.
The most manipulative, incentive structure is not a rule with a known punishment. It is the unknown punishment. It's a norm in which you don't really know. So when they issue
Damocles' sword.
Yeah. So the universities overreact. But part of the reason that they overreact is because they're increasingly on board with this feminine agenda, increasingly run by women and seen as institutions for advancing the cause of women. So most universities are overacting and responding positively to this. So what's going on in my life? Before I gave my wife an ultimatum about sobering up, she came to me, said she wanted a divorce, she wanted to move back to New York, take the kids, blah, blah, blah. And I was in this self-reflective mood because she threatened divorce every year. But this time I said, well, what happened? Who did she think she was marrying, and who did she wind up with? She thought she was marrying this handsome guy who's wicked smart and has great career prospects. And I turned myself into a fat, bespectacled, boring, debt-laden college professor. Not what she thought. She thought she was marrying Indiana Jones. And instead, she got whatever your caricature of an engineering professor might look like. So I sat her down and I said, I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to get myself in shape. I'm going to figure out our finances. I'm going to start looking better. She's like, well, why are you telling me that? I said, because we're married. That was when I was reading Apple K, and I wanted to stay married. And I knew that I'd have to make myself into someone whom she was attracted to. 6
Was
months
this back when it was Male Action Plan, or was it Mindful Attraction Plan?
It was
the old one.
Right. Before he feminized it to try and sell more books, and then had a heart attack and went out of business. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Male Action Plan had a lot of useful stuff in it. So I started my map. Lost weight, got my contacts, better clothes, got myself in shape. My daughter made a workout for me. She called it the Fat Daddy Workout. And then
she's got no chill, man.
Brutal. She's now a Krav Maga instructor. And so I went to her class. I went 3 months and I go, I got to quit. She goes, why? I said, there's too much choking. Like, can't take it. So she can be very direct.
Yeah.
And then something happened to me in the classroom, and it gave me some insight. When I lost the weight and I became handsome again, and I got my finances together and I started dressing better, guess what? Women started responding to me. Now, I'm in engineering, right? But some of these women, some of the engineers are women. And then I realized that the whole blue pill script in my head, why did I get fat? Why did I make myself ugly? I had to go back into my past and do my ruminating and realize that when I got married, I didn't stop being a man. I was still attracted to other women. And I thought, well, this is a freaking problem. I want to stay faithful to my wife. I made myself unconsciously fat and ugly so that I would not be attractive to students, especially graduate students and other women. And that would keep me faithful to my wife.
Talk about lighting yourself on fire to keep others warm, huh?
Correct. Yeah. Well, I made myself unattractive to her. Like it was a shitty ass strategy. But when I think about the problem that I was trying to solve and the shame that I felt about still being attracted to women and working in an environment with young women, and now I'm, I add the whole dad thing onto it. I see how I was working towards the solution of a problem that I had. And I decided I wasn't going to have that problem anymore. I decided, fuck it, I'm going to be attractive. I don't have to be unfaithful. I'm in charge of where my dick goes. Like, I can handle all of this. And women started showing up in my research group. And they're smart and they're motivated. And by one series of pre-selection cascades, Miss Latino Arizona is now working for me as a research assistant. And then Miss Phoenix, and then Miss Cave Creek. If there was a fucking engineering beauty queen in the state of Arizona, she wound up in my research group. Brian, I was naive. I didn't know about, female competitiveness and pecking orders and things like that. And I didn't realize.
The swing set. That's what Iron Ironwood calls it, the swing set of solipsism.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a clever term. Anyways, it's whatever. Keep going. I don't
Well,
want to
it
cut you
worked
off.
out fine until I split from my wife, and then I became the object of suspicion inside the university. What are all those beautiful young women doing in Dr. Seager's group while he's getting divorced? And
Oh,
none of them, um, like, made a complaint. But one of their friends in another research group reported me to the Title IX office. They started an investigation,
oh yeah, they have to take it seriously.
right? They dragged all my, and I'm not allowed to know, they dragged all my graduate students down into their office and they said, so what's going on? And they weren't allowed to talk to me about it, but it came out much later. And they said, what do you mean what's going on? And they said, oh, I think you know. Because that's the way that
Talk about a leading question too.
right.
Yeah.
They conducted this whole investigation. They eventually interviewed me. They said, have you ever had an affair with a student or a sexual relationship with a student or something like that? And I said, ever? And they said, blah, 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 blah. And I said, I met my wife 20 years ago when I was teaching at a community college. Yes, I have dated a college student. They go, well, that's not what we're talking about. Well, what are you talking about? Because none of this is revealed. So we had this bizarre conversation. They wrote up a letter and they said, Dr. Seager has not violated any ASU policies, but he might. And I was remanded to my dean.
Well, what a conclusion, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he did it once 20 years ago. What's to stop him from doing it now?
Yeah. 20 years ago, times were different. My wife was a year older than me, I suppose. It was my department chair that said I should meet this woman. She wasn't in my program. She wasn't my student. But I was pissed. And your story about, the espionage investigation reminded me of, I'm investigated, I'm cleared of any wrongdoing, and I'm guilty anyway. Yeah. And that's when I knew the university had changed. So that's my personal story. And I started going into Title IX and I started learning about what was going on the university campuses. And I realized that Title IX was an instrument of abuse for men. Mm-hmm. That it was there was a political weapon to advance women at the expense of men. It was very helpful to read Rollo, and it was helpful to see my daughter, who was going to ASU, enter this dating world. She's had 3, I'd say, I don't know if the number is right in the level of serious, but let's say she's dated 3 guys while she was an undergraduate. Every single one of them, she was convinced he's gay. I'm like, no, that guy really likes you. Dad, he doesn't. We just go out, we play ping pong and we talk, but he's gay. And I'm like, daughter, I'm not sure that he is. I swear, Dad, I don't think he likes me at all. Turns out he's not gay. He's freaking terrified. Because if you look at a woman on campus cross-eyed, then you set yourself up for the same kind of investigation that I went through.
Do you know the Canadian military has this same thing? It's called Operation Honor, Op Honor. We, out of our top 5 generals and admirals in that, we've lost 4 of them in the past 2 years because of these Op Honor sharp accusations. One of them, a guy when he was at RMC, military college in the 90s, mooned somebody drunk. They pulled him as a 3-star general out of his career because of that. And they've been slowly replacing them with female top brass.
Is it because he had a fat ass?
It's literally it's so obviously, it's we need a reason. Give us a reason and that'll work. Bare ass. We're going to count that.
Yep.
I got friends still in the military and we did a lot of shit, man, early on. And they're there's the chance that all it takes is one person to bring it up and they can ruin careers. So it's not even, and Dalrock talks about this in this article, Threat Point. So it's not about nailing you to the cross because they want your job or anything like that. It's that you're that head on a pike to keep everybody else in line, and it gives a cooling off effect to other guys around.
Yep.
And that's the part that's weird. And it's not just academia, it's not just military, marriage law. There's a reason that divorce rape is a thing. It's to keep all the other guys from, being a little more subservient in that. And it's very pervasive, and you can't help but interpret it as anything other than a female attack on male institution. Even
It's
if
no longer.
individually speaking, other people may have good intentions, but that how it all manifests at the end. Fuck,
So
you've
the
been red pilled
universe.
by the fucking academia. Look at you go.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
That was the height of the Me Too movement, and then COVID took over, and it's hard to find the feminist agenda in COVID. I haven't thought about it, but the university, in my mind, caved. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
gave up all the principles of truth and science and caved into the propaganda, the
Yeah.
mentality that will advance a political agenda at the expense of men and call it equality. This Orwellian doublespeak fucking hidden agenda is
Yeah.
exactly the kind of environment in which COVID propaganda will thrive. COVID is an instrument of control. It is the height of the victimhood manipulation. You can't do this, and you can't do that, and you can't do the other thing because maybe I might contract a disease that in a remote possibility, I'm not a victim yet. But because I can imagine becoming the remote possibility of a victim, you're not allowed out of your house. It is, in other words, the Title IX and the Dear Colleague letter reinforced this culture of manipulating the world through the victim's story. And
Yep.
COVID was layered on top of a powerful foundation that our universities built. And here we are 2 fucking years later, lying to ourselves about COVID.
And I guess that's the problem, is all we can do is wait to see, like, will it thrive in spite of or because of this in some way we don't know yet? Or is it going to die on the vine?
What do you mean, all we can do?
Well, individually, I prefer to just like navigate as opposed to try and change the world. I don't like to light myself on fire to keep the world warm. I don't like to save the world shit. So I could be wrong
You don't
from
have the
my
same
perspective.
complex that I do.
Probably. Oh, probably. Like I said, I just left the military. I didn't bother trying to fix anything. Like, fuck that. Let it fail. Let it fail. I'm just gonna make sure I get mine. And if I have to keep running west, because every time they keep making cities on the East Coast, that's like what's that thing where the Americans kept moving west? The emancipation. Yeah, the manifest destiny. That's the approach I'm taking. I don't know if it's gonna work or not. It's the red pill approach that's worked for guys so far. There's tons of west still left.
No, I'm going Braveheart on this one. I'm martyring myself.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I hope you win and I lose on this one. I'm not saying I'm in the right here at all.
I wrote an article with AJK Writer called "The Curve is Already Flat," and this is what I mean about changing the world. That thing, which was her idea, I helped with the graphs, but she had the insight because everybody in my world was saying COVID is a disaster. We got to shut down. And she's like, no, Tom, it's bullshit. And this is the data why. So we wrote that one. You're going to find it on the Morosco Forge website. It's still our most popular article, but it might be a little outdated. And you can find AJK Writer on Twitter if you want. The point is, I will not navigate away from this storm. I published the article. It made me a target within academia. I did a thing in my classroom, which I do every year, a reseating exercise. I didn't violate any social. In any case, there's one empty seat between every student when I did it this year because of COVID. I'm wearing a mask. They're all wearing masks. This is my understanding of the university policies. And it blew the frick up. Somebody took a picture of somebody on Zoom took a picture of my classroom, put it on Reddit, and said,
"Oh, there's the fucking."
You remember this? In any case, I became like the notorious scapegoat, like the world's worst COVID denying professor. Newsweek, San Francisco Chronicle, U.S. News and World Report all picked up this story about how evil I am. And of course, they found the curve is already flat, and which they called was a COVID denying story. It's not. It's a wonderful article. There's some great science and a powerful, compelling human interest story in there. And the next thing you know, I'm under investigation again. My attorney.
Question for you though: how did your page views for your website and your Twitter, like, did all your social media kind of blow up?
I don't have any paid views. Yes, like our Google rankings increased, but I don't charge anything for a Substack. None of our articles are behind a paywall at Morozco Forge. But we did get a boost in Google rankings, and there are people out there in biohacking and health and wellness who feel just as angry about the COVID lies as we do. Some of them found us, and some of them said, I want to buy your product. So there was like a strengthening of our tribe. And I have a couple articles in there about ice baths, cold exposure, the immune system. There's some good science behind the health and ice baths. So it's a fit. AJK Writer blew up. She was a popular writer on Medium. And when Medium censored that article, like people came out of the woodwork to try and support her work and to recruit her for more writing. And she introduced me to Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford University. And Jay's not sitting down. Jay's going to change the world too if he can, because right versus successful. We talked about this before. 90% of the time, you're going for successful. But there are a few things that are so important that you are willing to pay the price of being right. And it might cost you your job. It might cost you friends. It might
slows the growth like a motherfuck. Hence this channel versus like competitors. Yeah, no, I feel you.
Yeah.
The part I was thinking about was funny is that hate mob coming after you and they attack stuff. That's how most people grow now. Like you need somebody to call you an asshole online for other people to know you exist. Because everybody hate follows everybody now. Nobody actually has fans. They have haters.
That's how your audience grows.
And those haters are your greatest marketers. So I guess to be fair, when you're saying like you want to change the world and that stuff, getting these people fucking shitting on you on Reddit is they're probably doing you a favor, which is weird in a way that they're helping you, even though they don't want to.
Sounds right.
Oh, it's horrible. If you want to check out more, it's a great, what's his name? Ryan Holiday. Trust me, yeah. I'm not lying. Yeah. Yep. From Tucker, Max, Cernovich, watching all these guys pull it through. You're back to Red Pill now. That's those Red Pill guys are the ones that kind of monetize the system.
Yep.
It's fucking weird. But hey, I hope you don't mind. We gotta call this one. There's Rule Zero started like 7 minutes ago. I gotta get back into there.
You gotta go.
I do. But we got to do this again. This was actually a lot more fun than I was expecting. I knew it was always fun with you, but this is like...
I'm glad your expectations were low enough for me to exceed them.
My expectations were high, and now they were like still too low.
I'd be happy to do it again, Ryan. Thanks for talking about me and my problems. Yeah.
Oh, it's whatever. These guys get to learn. They get to learn. We get to swap notes. You taught me a fair bit about shit that I had never thought of, and I still got to come up with a term instead of self-sabotage now. So thanks for giving me fucking homework, Professor.
I'll be grading it. I don't grade shit. Thank you,
Ryan. And then, follow all the links in here, guys. Moro's Forge. I can never pronounce that right.
Morozco Forge.
Morozco Forge. We've had tons of articles. I'll put it in the description as too. Check out the ice bath stuff. It's pretty cool. And I will catch you guys later.